Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the December 20th, 2023 meeting of the City of Charleston Planning Commission. My name is Charlie Carrick. I'm the chairman. I'm joined. Thank you. I'm joined by Vice Chairman Harry Hussein, commission members Bart Jackson, Jimmy Bailey, Donna Jacobs, Sandy Lemphasis, Cleta Bryant Jenkins, and McKenna Joyce. So you know we're appointed by Charleston City City Council. We're volunteers, and I know you join me in thanking you folks for their work. Before we move on, I'd like to, with the last meeting, Ms. Bryant Jenkins lost her father, and I'd like to do we did a moment of silence. I'd like to do that as well tonight, since she's here. A moment of silence in memory of her father, and also hopefully that we get some peace in this great country and this world. So if we can do that, I appreciate it. Thank you all. It's Mr. Jackson's first meeting, and I told him I'd pick on him a little bit and ask him to say just a minute or two about himself. Now, the only thing I'm gonna say is I understand he's friends with Mr. Bailey, but I told him we would not hold that against him.
Guilt by association. Thank you, Mr. Parrish. I really do appreciate that. It's exciting to come on board. I've known Angie Johnson, who sat in this position. We've worked together. I know several others on the panel. I'm from Daniel Island. I have married a wife from the University of Georgia. I went to the College of Charleston. We've raised two girls out there. I've got one of them a senior at Clemson. The other one's a freshman at University of South Carolina. That makes my friend Jimmy happy. But have lived in downtown and then have lived in Mount Pleasant. He went out to Daniel Island early on. I'm a real estate appraiser and a real estate agent. Daniel Island's sort of close to nothing, but central to everything. So whether I'm working in Somerville or Johns Island or wherever, Daniel Island's been a good place to be. And so when Angie was stepping off of this, she had known me from Daniel Island Real Estate, where I did general brokerage. And a lot of real estate agents know me through my appraisal practice for the last 30 years. So got to speak to this great group, and I'm now going to sit here and see what we can, I'm gonna learn tonight and see what we can do in 2024.
Well, thank you. You add to the group. We appreciate you being a part of us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the way the meetings will run tonight is I'll read an item from the agenda into the record. Then we'll hear from staff. Then we'll hear from the applicant. Then we'll hear from anyone that's supporting the application. Then we'll hear from anyone maybe in opposition to the application. Then we'll let the applicant have a word to answer any questions that were brought up by any opposition. After that, we'll close the public hearing, and then commission members will discuss, make comments or make a motion. If you have a phone, I'd ask you turn it off or turn it on silent. If you come up to speak tonight, we ask you to come up to the podium, tell us who you are, where you live, and if you represent anyone. Have I missed anything, Mr. Hussein?
You can hear that?
Okay, good. Make sure. So the first item on the agenda is the minutes.
Mr. Chair, we have a couple of deferrals too.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Moore, why don't you introduce any staff that's going to be
Okay.
presenting and also any changes to the
Sure.
agenda?
I'm Christopher Morgan, planning manager here at the City of Charleston. I'm assisted here tonight by Omar Mohammed, planner with the Planning Commission, John Lambert, our new mobility planner here at the city, Molly Connor, our annexation coordinator, and Philip Clapper, our clerk. We're looking forward to going through these cases. There have been a couple of deferrals. 162 Ashley Avenue under rezoning has been deferred, and the resident subdivision 2682 Highway 41 and Bucksbury, that has been deferred.
Thank you, sir. First item on the agenda is minutes of September the 20th. Did we get all those September 20th and October 18th? Those were sent to us.
Yes.
And I'm always going to pick on Ms. Jacobs.
We only got the September 20th.
So the September meeting, we didn't get to October 18th. Okay.
And I looked at them and I didn't see any important changes to the agenda.
Okay, so is that a motion to accept?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second by Ms. Lemphasis. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Anyone in opposition? Great, thank you. The first item on the agenda, and there's a couple of things, is the first item was 134 Columbus Street, Kenmore, Ellicville, Peninsula, TMS number 4600802006, 3.77 acres for press rezoning from light industrial LI to planned unit development PUD and to rezone from 4 and 8 Old City Heights District 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 and 8 to 12 ABC Old City Heights District. Since that and the ordinance amendment really tie in together, I'd like to read that in the record. If someone would make a motion, they will take those together. Ordinance amendment is number 1 to amend Article 3, Site Regulation Part 2, Old City Height District in view for protection of Chapter 54, City of Charleston zoning ordinance to establish a new 8-12 Heights District. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request to the commission that we discuss both, number 1 under rezonings and number 1 under ordinance amendments together, take those
I'll
together.
second that. If you can look at the ordinance first and then.
well, he's going to discuss all of it at once, so we'll hear it all. So there's a motion by Mr. Lassane that we take those items together. Second the motion.
Jacobs second.
Oh, sorry, second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And no in opposition, great. Mr. Morgan, the ball's in your court.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you all chose to discuss those together because they really are intertwined here with this project. Obviously, we have a PUD before you, and it's a very innovative PUD, and it's the subject of lots and lots of work between the city staff and on the part of the applicants. You know, this is the 3rd phase of a very groundbreaking set of developments that have gone on in the city. The first phase was the Corridor Square Phase 1, the corner of Meeting in Columbus, which is the now the Gray Star headquarters and some retail, and the Guild Apartments, very handsome building designed by Robert Southern Architects out of New York. Then we've got the Phase 2, which has some equally striking buildings that are going to get under construction, I believe, next year. On the western side of King Street and south, a little bit south of Columbus and all the way over to St. Philip Street with a range of uses there from continuing care type of facility to apartments to retail. And other good additions to the King Street area. And then now tonight would be the 3rd phase, which is this planned unit development that is bordered by Line Street, King Street, Columbus Street, and the future low line. And the interrelationship of the low line is going to be very important on this project and to all these parcels here. And of course, the relationship to King Street is going to be very important because this is really a continuation, what we're seeing in all this, of the great things that we have on King Street in the city and carrying a lot of those same characteristics to the north of Spring Street. Kind of traditionally over the last probably couple of decades, people have talked about King Street, talking about up to Spring Street, and not much discussion for the areas above that. But now we're really getting to move into this area and create some new development that follows some of those same principles. That's a very exciting thing. And then, of course, the low line is a very exciting thing. You're going to hear from the development team about all that's going on and their efforts in reference to the low line. And then this is all intermingled with heights that would be a change to our height ordinance, and that's why it's there before you the ordinance. But it's actually a change that is something that was really discussed. It was not fully approved or in the approval process from our 2017 height study, but it was actually discussed that extra heights in our kind of spine areas of our city and on particular key sites in our spine of our city between King and Meeting might deserve additional height, particularly if they were willing to limit their capacity on that site, not add more capacity by virtue of having that extra height. And that's really what these height amendments are all about, is that they would allow for urbanistic buildings that could be a little bit taller and thinner, meanwhile giving us a landscape that has more diversity to it than just a kind of blocky 8-story building, which would be able to be built at present under the current height regulations. So it's something that it all works together, and we've been very enthused to be a part of it and see all the great urban design that's going on in here. I'll show a few more slides to give you a sense of it, and then we'll kind of go through a few particulars of the PUD, and then we'll let the development team do their full presentation tonight. There will be a good bit of detail here. It's going to take a little while, but this is a really important development in this part of the city, and it has some layers to it. So I think it's going to be good for you all.
I need to ask you one thing.
Yes, sir.
And I meant to ask this earlier. Is anyone here a zoning issue? Anything on the zoning? Because if you are, I just didn't want to kind of get that moving forward. No one's here for, we have a zoning, the zoning, it's just zoning. You here?
134, right?
Not rezoning, zoning. You have a zoning,
Yes, sir. I'm here for item number 1 under zoning.
the Wallace Lane,
Yes, sir.
and how about you back there?
Yes, sir. I'm here for number 2 on zoning.
Okay. I'd like
I'll
to,
move that we move that forward.
those two items up quickly. That's, that's Jacob, second by Mr. Bailey, all in favor, signify by saying aye. I apologize, I meant to ask that earlier, because I hate for those folks that have to sit through it, that's all. So we're gonna regress, and I'm reading number zoning. Number 1 is 1819 Wallace Lane, West Ashley, TMS number 351-02-000-21, 1.25 acres, versus zoning with GO, some single family residential off Florida. Mr. Morgan.
Sure. So, this is a site that has been purchased by the city of Charleston for use as a future city of Charleston fire station. You can see the site here, is fronting on Ashley River Road. It also has frontage on Richmond Street and then frontage on Wallace Lane, which is a primarily residential street to the rear. This would be a replacement of a fire station that's off of Ashley Hall Plantation Boulevard, I believe it's called. That one is gonna ultimately be replaced by this one. And we have proposed a zoning for it of general office because that does not have residential associated with it. We knew the community was concerned about more residential in this area. And the general office category will allow our public safety, our fire station here without having to create the concern that there might in some way be residential associated with it. And you can see, we've got, in our comprehensive plan, it's in our, future land use is suburban. The GO is a good transition in reference to that because it's, again, not allowing for residential density, and it's just, the fire station itself. We have, aerial view of the vacant lot that is, subject to this, zoning and the recent annexation and the city's purchase. And our staff is recommending approval for the GO.
Great, thank you. Ma'am, would you like to be heard on this?
Sure. My name is Melina Dinwiddie. I am the real estate management director for the city. So Mr. Morgan actually covered everything that I was going to say. I just wanted to, reaffirm that this will be the future site for the relocation of fire station number 16, which is on 81 Ashley Hall Plantation Road. We are excited for this opportunity to relocate that station here. And I just wanted to thank the commission's consideration of this rezoning request.
Thank you for being with us. Anyone else like to be heard on this particular item? On this item alone? No? If not, that up. Would you like to be heard on this item? You come on up. If you'd like to be heard.
Okay.
And tell us who you are and where you live. Thank you.
My name is Michael Brown, State 1817 Wallace Lane. This community just went through the zoning process for Charleston County. They sided with the community, and now we are back here again for the city. The city purchased the property. The city knew exactly what the zone was when they purchased the property. As a community, we have given property for the 526 project. We've lost members of our community due to that. We have a person in Wallace who previously owned the property that was bought by the city. They donated land for a school, Wallace School. The whole community was basically Mr. Wallace's property, a lot of it. So what we would like to have is something that is going to help the community, our community, this time. We've helped the overall Charleston community by donating them taking our property for highways, and Mr. Wallace them donating property for the school. We would like to have something in line that would be a training center for our young adults. We would like to have something that's in the area of a wellness center for our seniors. we give, and give, we would like for you to at least acknowledge us there and our contributions to society.
Yes, sir.
And we have, with this community, Trotty Woods, we have plumbers in the community, we had electricians, we have auto body mechanics, we have bridge engineer, we have submarine design and construction, we have materials testing, engineering materials testing abilities. This community would like to have the Charleston community to step up and not treat us the way most of the people are treated here with their property, by being railroaded into the way that the government wants it to be. Like I said, we went through this with Charleston County. Charleston County agreed with us. We were asking you to take a look at probably trying to help the community itself instead of putting the fire station in.
Right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Look, just a point. What we do is because the property's coming in the city, we zone it. We have to zone it. And some of the uses, just so you know, that you mentioned probably would not be residential, probably have to be geo, just as a point. But anyway, thank you.
I understand that.
Thank you.
What I'm saying is, don't only look at the fire station, but the overall view.
Yes, sir.
Look at our community that is given
Yes, sir.
before. Now, some of the plantations that they took property from, then they've had covenants where they want a change or come and take any more of their
I
property.
hear you 100%. I just want to let you know, we don't decide what goes and we zone in, but our particular board doesn't decide what use, we zone it, but then we don't decide what exactly goes there, just so you know. But thank you. And we hear you, but thank you. Thank you for coming too, sir.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Pittman. I live at 1828 Wallace Lane. And I need to find out, would like to find out, when you do the general office, the rezone that, is that gonna change from a single family resident? Where
Yes.
we are?
Yes, ma'am, because it's right now, it's R4, correct?
Right.
So just the property that the city has purchased.
Just that one piece that said it's first.
It will not affect the rest.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so I wanted to find out. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to be heard on this? Yes, sir, come on up.
How y'all doing? My name's Jerome Bennett. I live at 1833 Wallace Lane. I've got some concern about if you do build a fire station there, where's it gonna come in at? Are you gonna use Richmond Road? Or are you just gonna use Highway 61 as your exit and entry? We don't want big trucks and we're gonna have some noise if you put a fire station. I understand that. But, it's a quiet neighborhood. We just got new neighbors. We can get new neighbors, new white neighbors. This is an old settlement community. Maybe 4 or 5 new families in the last 4 years. And the lady was just commenting. We had a meeting last Saturday about how beautiful and quiet the neighborhood is. And she didn't really want to see a fire station up there because of the noise and, the inconvenience to the neighborhood. So this is an old settlement community. We want it to remain residential. If we go along with a fire station there, like Mr. Brown just said, he would like to see the property be used for more community purposes. It's been a residential neighborhood for more than 100 years. I grew up back there. I think my dad moved us out of that neighborhood when I was 5 years old. I'm 70 now. So, but, I'm back in the neighborhood because I knew it when I was a kid. So, I built a new house back there 20 years ago. So I want the city to be mindful of what it's doing. If you have the community's blessing at all to build a fire department, we don't want it to intrude on our peaceful neighborhood, okay? Y'all think about that.
No, thank you, sir. I remember when that area, Mr. Waring used to tell me, Ms. Lempus was remember that was all farms. I think Mr. Waring and his daddy had a
Yeah.
farm back then, all, but anyway,
The Wallace farmed the whole entire neighborhood.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Is there anyone else like to be heard on this item? Anyone else like to be heard on this item? All right. Okay, thank you. Since the city is the applicant, would y'all like to respond to it? Any concerns were brought up? I don't.
I think one of the things that we should emphasize is that the vast majority of our stations, and I've been going through them in my head, thinking about them around the city, at least a dozen are immediately adjacent to residential areas and have coexisted for, in some cases, decades and decades adjacent to those residential
about the
areas
one on Whitworth
and have not
Street.
compromised those. Exactly, very high-end houses adjacent to that one, in fact. And we just built a new one that was in the Carolina Bay development, that again, is immediately adjacent to residential. And we have not heard complaints about how these stations operate. You know, it will be a very modern facility. I know that there are times that when the trucks do have to go out at night, you know, if it's not a traffic situation, they typically don't turn on their sirens. They just blink the light, you have the lights going and things like that. So I think that the fire department is very used to operating immediately adjacent to residential uses and being good neighbors. So
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, would you like to say anything else? Are we okay?
You covered everything I was
All
gonna
right, thank
say.
What,
Ma'am.
exit about Charlie?
Ma'am? What am I saying? Were you in opposition to this? Well, come
Yes
on
and
up, tell
no.
us who you are
Okay,
quickly and tell us where you live. Thank you.
my name is Ella Bennett and I live at 1833 Wallace Lane. We've been battling, like my neighbors have been saying, about this piece of property on Ashley River Road, Richmond, Wallace Lane area. I would just like to ask that question again. The entrance and the exit, will it be on Ashley River Road, Highway 61 and not Richmond?
And I don't know that they know that. Have they designed that yet?
typically the way stations like this are designed, the trucks exit onto Ashley River Road because they need to get out in a hurry. There may be some signalization that's created for that, for just emergency signals, that kind of thing. We do like to have the stations where they load from the rear. So typically there is a driveway or some sort of access to the rear for the trucks to go in so they don't have to back in. But beyond that, we haven't done a site plan. It could be that there would be a driveway off of Richmond, or it may work that we could get both driveways on Ashley River Road. That has to be figured out. But in any instance, we're going to be very compatible with the neighbors. This is going to be a beautifully landscaped site. It will be a beautiful, handsome building. You should go see.
Y'all will get some community input.
Yeah.
Y'all designing that. They'll have the community meetings and input.
Okay, and I also have one more request. Even if you can get the fire station there, can we get like a police substation also?
Well, yeah, we don't decide that. Hold on. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Lassane?
Can I ask a question? Has the city met with the neighborhood to discuss this with them? No.
So I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I started in April and we were already under contract for this. I do understand that that is normally something that would be done. I would be happy to look into that and get an answer. And if that's not been done, I love the suggestion that's been made today about having a community meeting, at least now, prior to any development, to discuss and get the community's input on the design and how this would work.
Yeah, Mr. Lassane?
No,
Well, again, I think when we have people come before us all the time, developers, we ask them to please meet with the neighbors. So we'd ask the city to do the same thing.
And
Ms.
Mr.
Jacob?
Chairman, just also for the commission's knowledge, this would also be under our design and review board.
Okay.
So the community will have input. I mean, again, I think we should have a meeting with the neighborhood early in the design process.
Can we
But
take that as
also
a
the
commitment
final
to the
design.
neighborhoods? We'll make that as a commitment.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. But the final design will also be a public meeting
Okay.
process that they will have input
Thank
into
you.
as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Several points. First of all, thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Well, let me ask one more question, just to make sure. No one else is in opposition? And we've heard the applicant, so that'll close the public aspect. Ms. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, again. Thank you, Mr. Bennett, for being here. You and I have spoken with each other. I worked extensively with them when we were doing our city plan, and I was actually going to bring this up on the agenda tonight, so I'm glad members of the community are here. Anytime that we look at any property that's adjacent to or involves a settlement community, based on all the work we did our city plan, it should at least be mentioned in the agenda that this is adjacent to a settlement community or part of a settlement community. We're kind of falling off that a little bit, and I think it's real important that we spent so much time in the city plan mapping them and saying we're going to respect them. So we at least should mention it, that they're there. I think that's a very important thing. So thank you for members of the community for coming out, and Mr. Bennett and I worked extensively during that process.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now, in addition to that, I
Okay.
wanted to tell the community that my house that I've lived in since 1985
Right next to the fire station.
is 3 stories, 3 houses from a fire station. And actually, your insurance goes down if you're close to a fire station. And it's really nice to have them because the house across the street from me was on fire and they got there very immediately. So they're actually a very friendly thing to have in your backyard. And in addition, I want to reiterate, because I sit in front of this board all the time, the design review board will have purview over how that station sits and looks with respect to your community. And you will have plenty of time to input with that board and give your concerns. So if the city's committed to coming to the community to talk, they can give you instructions on how that process will work.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Ms. Bailey?
I'll make a motion. I think this is one of those sites that we frequently see where you look at it and you say it's probably never going to be a residential home again. It's going to be commercial of some sort. I think the recommended zoning category is appropriate, so I'll move for approval.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Ms. Brian Jenkins, great, thank you. We've heard that, and you know, in addition, I think Mr. Bailey said it, even if there's a fire station develops there and the community's involved, there could be some other maybe uses on that property, and then in the top of the fire station, they have meeting rooms and things like that. So hopefully that can all be accomplished. But again, we appreciate the city will be willing to meet with the neighborhoods and before the design review to discuss everything.
And I just wanted to reiterate that the city has a real duty here. I think before you bring something to us, that you've met with the neighborhood. So I'd like to stress that. And then I would also say to the folks who came out asking for a civic use on the site, I can't think of a better civic use than a fire station. It will be a community asset, just as Ms. Jacobs had said. And I think ultimately you will like having it there, but I'm disappointed that you hadn't been communicated when this was brought before the board. Thank you.
I hear you. So there's a motion by Mr. Bailey, second by Ms. Brian Jenkins. If there's no discussion, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition?
Charlie, I would like to add that we may not have a police substation there, but the fire department, they're very resourceful in what they can do. They don't just put out fires. If you have a child that's not breathing, if you have any adult that needs help, the fire stations are wonderful places to have nearby. And I would like to ask one question. I know we've already voted on it. What is the buffer? The buffers, Christopher, between the fire station and the residential?
I would think it's probably about 25 feet, but I would imagine that it will
That's
exceed
part of the
that.
discussion.
And this will be a fully landscaped site. Again, taking a look at the new fire station we built in Savannah Highway, which has been an architectural award winner. The new station we built in Carolina Bay, which is very handsome, well landscaped property. I think the community will end up being pleased with, the look of it.
Good question. Thank you. So that's 8 in favor, none opposed. Thank you all. I appreciate you all coming. We hear you and we agree with you, and let's move forward together. I think the other person that was here for item number 2. Is that correct? And the zoning, is that right, sir? So let me read that correct. 771 Brownfield Road, Charleston, TMS number 312-0000000. I got enough zeros. 4.768. Express zoning of business park BP. Was on agricultural A8. Mr. Morgan.
So this is a property that a lot of people know as a tomato shed on Johns Island. It's an industrial type of building that has been there for many decades. It's no longer used really for tomato processing. and has been acquired, and, there's interest in having other uses on the site. And, our staff was, not in favor of this having an industrial designation, because of course industrial does have a allowance for residential in it. We wanted to have a allowance here that allowed for small businesses and commercial uses that were in line with the type of building that's there, which is a fairly robust industrial type of building. And so I'll show you some pictures of it. In our comprehensive plan, it's in our suburban edge because it is immediately adjacent to urban growth boundary along Brownsburg Road. And by virtue of it going to business park, it would not have any residential designation, any residential units that could be associated with the property. I believe we have an aerial, unless it gives you a sense of how much of the site is covered with this building. It's a fairly large metal building, loading docks, things like that. So it's had a history of, fairly intensive use from that standpoint. And I think this could be a great location for other uses in the future, like contractors, building materials and things like horticultural activities, storage of vehicles, all the things that are allowed in business park. And so that's why we have recommended for that and bring it to you for your approval.
Thank you. The applicant here. Come on up, sir. Tell us who you are.
My name is Chip McQueen. I'm with the Burke Woman Law Firm. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I almost repeat verbatim what Christopher said. He covered it very well. The plan is to keep pretty much the same, to keep the same building, keep the same yard. The city zoning ordinance requires a little bit better buffer requirements than what's currently out there. So certain types of uses, the more intensive uses, will require a 6-foot solid wall. Why are we rezoning, or really why are we annexing and zoning? Sewer service is currently served by septic tank, and we need access to sewer service. No residential uses are allowed here. It's actually, because I'm curious, I checked the zoning ordinance to see when this business park arose past 1989. I was hoping it would say for properties off Brownswood Road on Johns Island. It did not say that, but I think it's perfect for this particular property. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. McQueen. Would anyone else like to be heard on this zoning? If not, that'll close the public aspects. Mr. Lassane,
I'll make a motion to approve.
seconded by Mr. Bailey. Is that correct? So Mr. Lassane motions to approve, second by Mr. Bailey. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition? So that's 8 in favor, none opposed. No one here else for zonings, correct? Great, thank you. We're gonna go back, and for Christopher, I apologize. I know making you shift. We're going back to rezoning number 1 and ordinance amendment number 1 as well. So I apologize.
Hope I can remember where it was.
Yep.
I thought that was gonna be quick.
You had just said,
Yeah, I mentioned, I knew.
I think I gave kind of the background of Curtis Square and how we got to phase 3 and a little bit about the low line and the applicants will talk a little bit about that. And then I was talking about the Height District and how in 2017, when we were working on the new height districts for downtown, all the heights by stories, it was discussed that, there could be certain sites that were in the kind of king spine of the city in line with our original downtown plan, where you have your greatest heights in that spine. That on certain sites, that if there was not additional capacity desired by virtue of more height, that if it was just to create better urbanism, that the greater heights would make sense. This was never codified in the ordinances, but it was definitely discussed. I even remember the discussions about it. And this was even identified as one of the sites that something like that would be eligible for. And so essentially what the applicants have done in this instance in reference to the ordinance amendment is just taken that height ordinance a step further and created a district that would allow for 8 to 12-story buildings. They've taken some inspiration from our Upper Peninsula district on that, but generally it's in line with what was discussed with the original consultants on our height rewrite, and the idea that you would be able to get some extra height if you weren't adding extra capacity on the site, if you were creating a cohesively designed site in a location that could benefit from great public spaces, things like that with the low line here. So very much in keeping with what has been discussed in the past about how we can deal with height. I was about to start going into the actual PUD itself, So let me go into a few details on that. You all know the site. It's in our city center location. So again, our most intense zonings are recommended in the city center. Our greatest heights are recommended in the city center. It's in our kind of east spine along the city, center of the city. And then some of the provisions of the PUD are listed here. I wanted to point out, first off, that the PUD is calling for 40,000 square feet of the site. That's of the 164,000 square feet on the site. 40,000 square feet of it would be public access space. It would be a large plaza in the center that opens to the low line. It would also be for the corridors that lead to that plaza. It would also be a little bit more space on King Street, so we can get on-street parking on King Street and then wider sidewalks on King Street, which are so important and definitely in keeping with the character of the lower parts of King Street. This part of King Street right now is a little bit narrower than some of our other parts of King. With this addition of extra space along King, we will be able to have the on-street parking and the good sidewalks that lead up to these buildings as well. You all have the PUDs, you've been sent those in advance, but I'll just really quickly go through some of the uses, and the development team is going to do a much more cohesive overview of this, but I just want to kind of list these out for everybody just to kind of read it into the record. But basically this site would allow for, in this PUD, up to 480 residential units. It would allow for an accommodations use to be consolidated. You could have multiple 50-room inns on the site under the current codes. This would consolidate accommodations units into 150 room facility. And then there would also be the allowance for a continuing care residential community.
So 150 total rooms?
Correct. And then this would allow for 250 continuing care residential units. Those are kind of senior oriented residential units. We also have the open spaces, as I already said, the 40,000 square feet of that. There are provisions about the low line that the applicants will go into as well. And then of course the height, and they have done all the background work that we require of a PUD in a location like this. And then finally, certainly not least, they would have affordable housing here. This would have, the goal was for the staff had projected to the team was for 20% of the units as affordable housing, which they are working towards. And we have a condition that we're presenting to you all tonight, and I'll just even show it to you. It's very, very simple, that the affordable housing on the site have the team had already proposed that 50% of their affordable units would be at the Star Gospel Mission site. This is a site that's not far away from here. And in fact, I will show it on this image here. It's within about 1,000 feet. It's over here between Meeting and Nassau. It's a facility that right now has limited ability to house folks. And the development team will go into a lot more detail about how Star Gospel works, but this would be a very unique opportunity to create more units for some of the most impoverished folks, most in need of housing folks. And then our staff would be in support of this PUD having the remaining 50% of their affordable housing allowance on the site built as on-site units. There are some other provisions about affordable retail, which we do like that, but our preference is on the surface to have the affordable housing take precedence on the site. And we realize that that creates some trade-offs with the affordable retail. A couple of other things I did leave off and given some of the stats. The PUD would allow for up to would have at least a minimum of 50,000 square feet of non-residential and non-accommodations commercial uses as well. So you would have a true mixed use facility here, office space, retail space in the ground floor. So a whole lot of effort has gone into this, and I'm very excited to be part of it, and are excited to bring it to you all and get your input on it. And with that, I think I will let the development team give their background on this.
Okay, great. We will get to you in just a minute. We'll hear from the rest of the applicant, and then we'll give input from the public. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I'm always saying not to Tilly, but Mr. Still. I'm gonna get his name correct.
I'm gonna let Mr. Owens begin here.
Okay. Someone tell you to.
Thank you, Planning Commission. We appreciate you allowing us to present this very important project tonight. My name is Ron Owens, the CEO of Evening Post Industries, the owner of the property that we're discussing today. Our company has operated in Charleston since 1894 and has owned this property since the 1950s. The PNC, Post and Courier, along with our other operations, have employed 500 to 600 people at this location until recently. And as you all know, many peers in the newspaper industry have merged their operations into national groups and have sold off their urban locations for redevelopment. EPI's owners are different. They're committed to Charleston and keeping the paper locally owned and operated, and I'm fortunate to work with a family that's passionate about implementing world-class design on the site. EPI actively participated in the planning process to establish a vision that includes adhering to high-quality urban design principles and public open space, along with creative solutions for affordable housing. This location has been the home for our company for over 70 years, and we care deeply and take great responsibility in ensuring this location is developed with good urban design. EPI is accomplishing this by partnering with East West to bring this plan to life. We selected East West because they understand Charleston and they share our vision for building a gathering place that the entire community can embrace. Together, we formed a strong team that's committed to our vision, and Christian's going to share the details of our plan in a few minutes. We've been working on these ideas, as Christopher said, really for over a decade, but very intensely over the last year and a half, digging into the details of this one city block to make it the best project that we can. It actually enhances the fabric of Charleston. We listened to the community, and with the input from our neighbors and preservation, along with Historic Charleston and the city planning staff, we've made this a better plan. So we've been doing that for the last year and a half. And we're excited about what we're going to present to you today, and we're honored to bring this forward. We believe this will be an exceptional project with high quality urban design and include significant open space that the community can use. It'll be a vibrant hub that'll embrace people with all types of activities and provide a creative solution to affordable housing. Let's start with our mission. Miller with East West is going to present the details of our vision and kick it off.
How are you, sir?
Thank you. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak and present this to you all again, and for the opportunity to present it back in October. So you all committed a lot of time for it. I appreciate that. I'm Miller Harper. I work with East West Partners. We're office just one block south of here at 299 East Bay Street. East West Partners was founded by a South Carolina native back in 1986, and it was founded up in the mountains of Colorado with a real focus on building resort communities. This is a property we built in Beaver Creek Village, where we built the ice skating rink and the gathering place that went along with the Park Hyatt and retail around it. So we started up there in the resorts, and since then we've grown to 7 different markets, and we developed about $7 billion worth of real estate around the country. Our mission statement as a company is that we exist to create different places that bring people together and share meaningful experiences. So we consider ourselves market specialists. We like to move to a location and try to figure out what that market needs and what's appropriate in that community versus one type of product and replicating it in multiple markets. So we moved to Charleston in 2000. This was our first project in Charleston, One Venue Range. We built this behind the waterfront park, which the city of Charleston did. They did an RFP process at the time, and we were selected to be the developer of that. Since then, we've grown our office to about 18 development professionals and then another 15 property management professionals. And our group of professionals all live, work, and play here in this market. We live in this community, and developing in here is something we're passionate about. Just a few years ago, we completed the first phase of the waterfront community. This is here on Daniel Island. We built a waterfront park, public plaza area with the Daniel Island Property Owners Association, Community Association. Before it was just old fields and the retail and residential all around it. This is a wonderful public space, and today is a vibrant community gathering place. If you're out there today, you'll see people walking on the trails, playing in the park, listening to live music, sharing a meal, or calling it home. We don't just build new communities. This is 71 Whitworth. This is a building that's an iconic building designed by John Henry Devereux back in 1872. We had the opportunity to purchase the upper floors of this and bring it back to life. Started working on this about 5 years ago. This is what it will be fit as we finish over the next couple of months. This is what we're going to unveil. So this has been one of the more challenging projects that we've worked on, but it's definitely just a hallmark of what we try to do, which is building community places. We're here today to talk about Curtis Square, as Ron mentioned, and Christopher mentioned. We started with EPI and Ron Owens about 2 years ago, and it was just evident right out of the gates that this was an iconic, this was an incredible opportunity to work on one of the most important properties in Charleston. It's 3.7 acres. It's located at the kind of the gateway of the Lower Peninsula. As King Street obviously on one side and the low line on the other. And it's clear that this is a place to do something significant and meaningful. It's really a once in a lifetime opportunity. As with all of our projects, we start with a vision, and we do that vision process by meeting with multiple stakeholders. And we do in a conversation with all of those stakeholders. As we set out to start on Courier Square, our vision is to create an intentional public experience open to the community through a rich mix of uses. When we start with that vision, it then informs all of the decisions that we make and all of the values and attributes that we try to bring to that place. So those key attributes for this project, as Ron mentioned and Christopher mentioned, a significant public realm and open space. The goal of that commitment is to create a gathering place for this district of King Street. There are a lot of homes being built in this neighborhood. We want to create a place for all those people to go other than just out onto the King Street sidewalks. With this public space, we are planning to set aside over an acre or just under an acre of 3.7 acres, which is on the 25% of our property. And that the majority of this space will be situated on the level. That public space, we hope, will be a catalyst for the low line. And as many of you know, the low line is owned by the city of Charleston. It is yet to be improved. We're setting aside $2 million as part of our development to improve our block of the low line from Columbus to Line Street. And this will hopefully be a catalyst to getting this important public project started here in Charleston. One of the things we heard a good bit about throughout our public input sessions was that people wanted it to be more than just one big building. They wanted to see multiple buildings in varying scale. So that was a challenge to us, and one of our challenges to the design team is to create varying footprints and scale, to create an exciting ground floor and skyline experience. And perhaps one of the more exciting things that we're doing is creative workforce housing and attainable strategy. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but we're trying to introduce a new concept that was envisioned in the city comprehensive plan, which we call attainable retail, plus bringing the affordable workforce housing into the market into our immediate facility. All of that together will do what we hope to do, which is create a living room for our community. So when we came up with the key attributes and vision, we brought in our design team, world class, and he's done a lot of hard work in over 75 meetings with stakeholders and community groups to try to inform the plan that you're about to see.
Good afternoon to the commission. My name is Kristen Situ. I'm an architect and urban designer. I'm a historic urbanist and I teach also at Santa Clara. It's a privilege to be here with you this evening and to share in a short presentation the outcome of a decade's worth of work. We really intensive work over the last 18 months for this very important stuff. And this is something we have done very much in the community. The process for this final phase of Courier Square was done in a collaborative design show that we held 9 months ago here in Charleston. We call it Design in the Sunshine. We wrote about that entire process. We did a lot of work beforehand on the economy subject, but then we have a collaborative design. We spent a week with an entire design team on the ground with an open studio back in March. And we had multiple public events during that meeting, and every time we do that, we learn a lot more. Now, we entered this process with doing our best to understand the history and the evolution of any site, which of course we did here. And it is very interesting that this block that we're talking about with 500 feet of frontage on King Street, a tremendous amount of frontage on Charleston Finest Street, also has 500 feet of frontage on the old industrial rail line, which is a future public face in Charleston. So from an urban designer's point of view, it doesn't get any better than this. And we know that from the old maps, and we know that from maps even over the last quarter of a century, going back to the city plan from 1999. I've used this plan in design studios before, and I always felt like it was such a good way of understanding and diagramming the evolution of this beautiful city. This is the 1999 downtown plan. It really makes the point. And there was still so much work to be done back then, but the importance of upper King, the importance of the structure of the spine business. Think of great cities like great people, they have a bone structure, and this is the spine of Charleston. And this plan made that very clear. There are edges and there's center. And the neighborhood all use the spine to communicate and connect.
So you know, I think Ms. Lampley just wrote that plan. That's part of it anyway.
So, it affects everything. It affects public space, but also affects the skyline. And that back in the 99 plan, there was discussion about that. That, you know, the heights should crest to the middle of the peninsula and taper down to the edges. You don't end up with a camel by building tall heights on the edges. So I feel it's incentive. As Ron mentioned, you know, we couldn't be happier. Projects are about buildings, public place, but they're also about the people and the community. And having a visible institution like the Post and Courier, who have been stewards of this site now for 70 years, and other sites in Charleston, is such an important ingredient to doing a project that has lasting value. And that work began 12 years ago on this 12-acre redevelopment site with the first phase of Courier Square, which was a bold new building that did something unbelievable. You know, thinking back a decade ago, it fronted the rail car. So it was prophetic in saying the low line will come and this building will front it. And it added something that hadn't been done in a long time. It added a civic feature to Charleston to become a local landmark as you look at it from maybe from the highway or from the street level, with the addition of that clock tower. So that first phase of Courier Square is of course complete, but it sets the bar for all the work to come. Of course, the second phase, which is complete in design and is ready to break ground, is across. So here we are looking down the spine of the peninsula. Phase one is here on Meeting Street. This is King Street. Phase two is here with the combination of the peninsula, it's housing, and then Radar project, which is more housing. So in a sense, phase one started at Meeting to work to the middle. Phase two starts at St. Philip's to work to the middle. And it's like a good game of chess. You start at the edges and the real action is in the middle of the board that you really work along from King Street and the middle. So the process, we call it phase three, that was more than that. It's the final phase, the final part of the scale. And so the very important questions that we began with as we started the charrette, which had to do with public space. And back to the analogy for a moment of the spine of the peninsula, the vertebrae along that spine, if you think of the fold at Lower King, the Charleston Place, and then Marion Square, the crossing of Calhoun, really that spacing suggests that Charleston deserves another public square, Courier Square. At that next point, that next vertebrae, this is our opportunity to create that kind of space that becomes part of Charleston's DNA. So that's really where we began. Of course, we are extremely excited about all the hard work that has gone in planning the low line, this 1.6 mile corridor, and sort of putting ourselves within the context of this new public space for the 21st century in Charleston. We'll talk about that. But the final phase is here. This is a map that we drew that included everything we could know about the site, both what is here today and what is not here yet that has been designed and approved. And so you can see our site is here with King Street. In this case, it's on the top of the map. The low country low line is here. This is the grade zone, the guild. And this is phase two. So you can kind of see the hole in the map. That is the site of this final phase. And then the properties over here are a project being built on West Stop community. So some of these buildings are in construction, some are not, that are designed. So we created a map with how we're seeing in the future. We knew what the context was, even if it wasn't fully built. And we began that process of not just drawing the map, but really spending time studying the site, walking the site. We talked about the clock tower as this landmark feature, understanding the view card with that. And we looked high and we looked low. We took our lives in our hands and we went up to the top of the crosstown to see what that community view was like. If I were to do that again, I would not do that morning rush hour. So we made it down in one piece. And it was good. We made lots of notes as we did those field studies. We also looked at King Street and realized that there were major important opportunities on this block on Upper King to start to think about bringing the line back and opening up the sidewalks and setting buildings back to have the proper width there. So we didn't just draw them on the map, but we pulled strings and we studied it very carefully in field. You can kind of see this as it is a thin sidewalk, industrial curb cuts. It's sort of brief and industrial past is not indicative of what King Street is. And then the low line as well, coming down from the parks down into the urban core of the peninsula, and this is going by the side of the Gill. So the charrette process is one where we draw in public. We actually do a lot of this work by hand, which allows us to draw and discard. So the best ideas we hold on to them, and the ones that can be improved on, we set aside and we draw again. We have a lot of open house, and we lay out important ideas about the process. One was this: that the solution must be humane. We think that Charleston is a beautiful, not just a city, but a beautiful body. And the city as a whole has that analogy. All the buildings and spaces should have that as well. So a lot of good feedback and dialogue during that process, and the designers keep working while everyone's talking, so we can capture all that feedback. We did this in a bank building. It was empty. We actually, one of our evening open houses had a bar set up, which was great. So you can deposit a comment card and you can get a glass of wine in return. So the withdrawal system we had there that night. That was the first time we've done Shrek in the whole bank. It was really phenomenal. We had a lot of attendance. I want to thank Charleston City staff again for their incredible help in helping us prepare for the charrette and then staying with us through the process and guiding us beyond that. As well, I'd like to thank our preservation stakeholders, Star Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society have been really following our process since before the charrette, and we're extremely involved through the process. So we see this as the city as sort of a collective work of art. And this is something Mayor Riley told me many years ago, that he said Charleston is like a beautiful painting. And if you're going to add a building to it, you're adding brush strokes to that painting. When you're done, it better be better and not worse. And we're reminded of that. We see the iconic moments, Church Street, looking up King Street. Anyone can draw these, but you know where you are. So the question is, what hasn't been painted? What is this new community place on Upper King Street that we're here to work on? And that's really what led us through the charrette, thinking about creating the city as a work of art, framing the clock tower of the Gill. Thinking about coming in from King Street, building to the Broadway end, in the middle of the block, this very large block. So that sort of guided us through, and it helped us to reaffirm principles behind the planning. The solution must be civic. Many projects begin with, how are we going to get so much of this, so much of that? This one began with, how are we going to create a public square? That is not what we often get to do. We're very excited about that. And we put that at the very top of the list. This is a civic enterprise. It's about a public and private partnership to make that happen. It's about engaging a range of scales. It's not a one-size-fits-all project. Enhancing vistas from the street and from the skyline. The solution of the work of art must be built with quality design and quality materials. It must be humane. It must be a Charleston. must relate well to all frontages. We have a lot of frontages in the project. And it must beautify the skyline and the woods we experience. Those were 10 principles we felt were true and will always be true to this project, and we must measure it against if we work. But the big project was finding the square in Courier Square. We set out to do that, knowing that it was somewhere between King Street and the Low Line to create the square. We kept looking for it. We kept looking for it in the middle of the block. As we went through the shred, I think we drew it 35 times, and as we hit the midpoint, we found where it was. And once we found it, it was one of those things, once you saw it, you couldn't forget it. It was actually on the low line. If we think of the low line coming through the site, Courier Square is a room, living room on the low line. And then from there connects up to King Street. So that began to really shape the way we thought about the project, because it fits it into the context of King Street and the low line. And if we think about, a house has hallways and rooms, if we think about the low line and the urban core, then it leads from one room, Marion Square, to Courier Square, and then on up into the neighborhoods. Once we found that, it really created rules for everything to proceed by. So we went to that big open site that we know is 3.7 acres, which is a very large block. And when we inserted Courier Square and locked it in with the clock, and then connected it through a series of rooms and passages up to King Street, then we found we had a design structure for a master plan that everything could follow. It also did some other things for us. It broke the block into pieces, some larger and smaller, and some very small. We created a small piece that we're referring to as a jewel box up on King Street to draw you into the site and down to Courier Square. So when we put it all together, that is really the master plan in a nutshell. It is a combination of public space, public realm, and private blocks within that are divided by that public space. And that led to the master plan that's really the foundation of the zoning that you're looking at this afternoon. This is the plan that came from Charette. We have followed it extremely closely and carefully and analyzed it and perfected it since that time, but the plan has not changed from what we developed during that process with the community. And it begins on King Street. It begins by actually pulling the buildings back, dedicating right of way to enhance and widen King Street to accomplish on-street parking on both sides, wider sidewalks, and then really activating that frontage. And then we jump down to Courier Square. It begins by defining Courier Square as a defined public space, a public square along that low-lying corridor. And then all the spaces in between that connect it all. This is a mixed-use plan. One thing you haven't seen yet, I'm this far in my presentation, I haven't mentioned parking yet. Usually we start with parking, and it's important that we haven't talked about it because we don't want to talk about it, but we have it. What we are committing to do with this plan is to actually locate parking below grade with the block. As much parking as we can below grade. We can get about half of that parking out of sight. And then at the ground floor, to not have any parking. Have all the parking that's needed, the additional parking, there will need to be parking on this side of the block, but have that jump up above the floor so that the whole ground floor can be actually used for retail, for restaurants, upper level restaurants, hospitality, and office space. So it's truly a multi-use plan, but it starts with good urban design, which is an active ground floor framed on public space, enhancing King Street as a Charleston finest retail street, carrying that retail down into the core and onto the low line. And it will also involve looking up and looking at the skyline and activating that. Continue on there, but this is the master plan in total. We've actually not just brought the right of way back down on King Street, but we're also setting back in from Line Street and Columbus Street to create public space around the block, and then creating that open space in the middle. So restoring King Street, I touched on this, involves that added right of way with wider sidewalks. We, done the technical analysis of that. And then developing Courier Square as a signature public space in Charleston. And the improvements needed to make that happen. It's really a keystone space for the Little Line. As we talked about the promise of the Little Line. As we did that, as we looked at the ground plane, we also looked at the sky. We look at how do we offset some of that open space, and how do we also create something beautiful in the skyline. So we began to think about this project, not just as we often see large buildings that go up to a simple height zone, but to think of it as punctuations of elements that go up taller and some that go down lower. So that we have real movement in the skyline. So you're starting to see a mapping of what that would take. And you can see here, this is the little dual block on King Street. This would be a very low piece, drawing you into the block. We have step downs to create sight lines. We have a taller element here. I'm going to come back to this. This building here is what we're referring to as our landmark building, a low-lying landmark building, some in Courier Square on a new public space. So a lot of early thought started to go into how you shape skyline. And this drawing sort of brings all of that together. The idea of creating a new public square, connecting with the King Street, and focusing it on a specific element, the clock tower of the Guild. And we start to see the buildings now are sort of divided through the decisions out of public ground. Here you can see we're looking up to King Street, you can see the peninsula here on the left, and 635 King Street, and the new residential being planned on the west side of King Street. And so that's really what we learned during Shrek. We was thinking about what this project create, the dual box and enters from King Street, the focal points in the design, the creating environment that would be working. As we studied it, we start with art, and then we do all the technical things. And that's, I know tonight is really a technical meeting, and I'm probably going longer than I should, but I wanted to share some of that back, and I appreciate you all letting me do that. But as we studied it technically, and this is what leads to the PUD, we realized that the purple here is the open space. That is approximately an acre, 40,000 square feet of open space. And it's expressed around the edges by the enhancements to the streets, Line, Columbus, and King, and it's expressed with the space moving through the block. The green area is actually, that is the low line area. That 40,000 square feet does not include that. That is on top of that. So everything in purple is a significant amount, almost 25% of the site dedicated to open space. We studied the height. We went back to the peninsula plan from 1999, the downtown plan, the idea of cresting in the center. We cut a section through the whole site, all of Courier Square, all the way from St. Philip's Street, all the way out to Meeting Street. And what we realized is also in kind of following that same logic, the buildings in the neighborhoods on phase 2 start here. They come up, 635 King gets taller, comes up King Street. And then if we start on this side at Meeting Street, the headquarters building for Graystar, the office building, starts at Meeting, goes up to the Guild, the clock tower of the Guild. And if you carry that line across, it suggests that additional height is appropriate on the spine of the peninsula. You might think of it as the center of the center. And that, all of the former projects have really been sort of building toward that opportunity. So when we talk about open space, we're talking about also, beautiful skyline. One of the things that we started to do was size that up. So how big is Courier Square? What would that look like? What could I relate that to? So we studied a few comparisons. The blue dash lines here are the footprints of other places, some farther afield. This is Covent Garden Square in London, and very much a living room in that area of the city. Fits very neatly over the footprint of Courier Square. We're bringing it closer to home, the Cistern Yard, College of Charleston. Of course, a very different kind of place for gathering and ceremony, but also roughly analogous to the size of Courier Square. Rockefeller Center in New York City, of course, different context, but all that has very interesting analogies. And the Grand Plaza at Rockefeller Center is actually very similar to the proportions and dimensions of Courier Square. And furthermore, if you think of it, I mean, knowing that space, if you walk between the buildings up to Fifth Avenue, you actually can see that same analogy, also with in through Charleston, Fifth Avenue, coming down into Harvard School.
No, Fifth Avenue is New York's King Street.
Thank you. The thing about this too, the really is a reminder is projects like this don't happen on their own. They take partnership, they take concerted effort. This could have been any other block in Midtown Manhattan, but they must have looked at King Street thought that and then, of course, closer to home here at Waterfront Park in Charleston. So these scale analogies were part of our process that we're making more, but I want to share a few of those. And then kind of coming back to this public space comparison, I'll share something briefly. Project we recently completed in Savannah with a 4.5 acre site, all privately owned on waterfront. And working with the city, we created connections to the river that would be a new part of the public realm. The same ratio held true, about 25% of the site ended up being public open space. To really create a great mixed-use district, also involved working on height to make all of that work. But the project is complete. In fact, it just won a recognition from the Urban Land Institute of their highest global excellence award. So something we're very proud of, something we very much believe in. And so it's the figuring out how to do this right, and also how to do height right. Height is a lightning rod whenever we talk about it. And as we study older buildings, we realize the formula is taller than smaller. And that's often what's missed in modern development. So we really went back to this charrette plan and started thinking about what is happening here. And we went back to great examples of older Stoddard's design for the Francis Marion building in 1924. It's a great reminder that a building that meets the street beautifully, meets the sky beautifully, but it's a slender building. Well, this is the Francis Marion, right on top of our low-line landmark building, which is actually skinnier. Then that gave me a lot of assurance that this is the old way of doing height. This is not to pick on another project because there are many we could use, but this is often what we get today. With larger footprint buildings that just use the whole height zone, and you end up with one big flat sky. This is another project here in Charleston. You can see that would fit neatly on the site. That is not what we want to do. That is not good or design. So it's about breaking down scale. We studied it. This was after the artwork. We started to study all the technical things. This is the height zone that we have today. It's very simple. It's kind of a dumb height zone. You can have 8 stories. You can go up to 9 stories with mechanical merit, and steps down and continue with 4 with a half story. And this is what we are envisioning. This is what we arrived at during the charrette and put all these pieces together, which is a collection of buildings on 15 by some fall and street. We studied what that would actually do if we looked at it just from a mathematics point of view. When you put the 40,000 square feet of living space into the block in the center, I think it was approximately 32,000 in the center, and 8,000 square feet around the edges along King Street and Columbus and Line, and actually also along the road. And then we also took height zones that are there and recommended that they be brought down on the edges. There's no step down on Columbus right now or on Line Street. We think there should be. So we also took the opportunity to sculpt the overall composition from the existing height zones that are there, pushing things down, sometimes to 0, sometimes from 8 to 3. So we did all that. And then as you would expect, we also looked at where should there be additional. And the most notable locations is on the low-line landmark building, and that's what we see there. We also selected some height in the center of the block. And that's really sort of the summary. So what we found was we had reduced approximately 400,000 square feet of the block with design concept. We added back 100,000 square feet. So there was a net reduction of 300,000 square feet. So we were looking to create better urban design, but we're actually also reducing development capacity within the project. We felt like that would work, and this was sort of the choice, so we, the dome height zone, or what we might think of as a smarter way to think about height that is really calibrated, it comes to a very deliberate design. So that's the process. This is the map that we have today. And what we proposed was what we're referring to as micro height zones, where we take just one block and look at really shaping and creating a very predictable approach to height. So this maps exactly back to the Charette master plan, where we have some zones that have been brought down, some step down, there are some zones that have been brought up, where the landmark building is. And so it looks complicated because it is complicated, but it's designed to be predictable. It's sort of like shrink wrapping or vacuum packing the block. And it's really about putting the landmark buildings on the public space. It's just as the Francis Marion and the landmark of Marion Square, or Sumter House. We can think about those landmarks. A great public place should have a landmark building. So our context, going back to the very first plan with the hole in the middle of the block, is to not just fill it in with another big footprint, but to fill it in with multiple smaller buildings that will truly be organic. And as we said, we looked at the historic height variations. We were reminded, we're emboldened by the exuberance of King Street, where you had real movements up and down along that street. And you find this after the Frank Marion Center, the whole testament to that, all of the smaller buildings. And we modeled it. We took the height zones and we modeled just some very rough, buildings have not been designed yet, and as you know, but we did just to be able to provide a visual of some of those, the effects of the project. So we look at the site coming in along the crosstown. The buildings in the foreground are actually not part of the phrase where those lifestyle community buildings. What you are doing is you're seeing into the background, and this is that low line landmark building that you can see in the space there leading down to the Curry Square. And then a focal point on King Street at Line Street here. And then coming in sort of from the ground level, we were walking in from the parks along the low line. That would be that landmark building, walking in between the two lifestyle communities buildings. And then just getting a bit closer so you can see it more properly. This would be that view. We're just getting ready to cross Line Street to head into Curry Square, and that would be the low line there. And then inside the site, moving from King Street to the low line, this also shows the shaping of space, sort of carving a river through the block so that we have those views to the clock tower, we have the views to Currier Square. This would otherwise be a parking lot. I mean, this is the default design for a project like this, is you put an above ground parking deck. So but all of this is important, the external edges and the internal space. And then looking back to the site, coming from the south, heading back up, we're looking into Currier Square here. And then looking at King Street too, we encoded this micro height zone map to require up and down movements on King Street instead of just one long line, which is often what we see, 200-foot building with one height zone. We actually have 5, 4, 3, 4, 5, and we have a 6-story height at the very far end. It sort of is an announcement to the lower peninsula as you cross through beneath the crosstown and you're entering the lower peninsula. So this is very much, King Street must be a work of art. We felt like we could encode that by creating this micro height zone approach. So as we look back down the street here coming in, this is the crossing of Line and King. We have a landmark element, and then we have that up and down movement that's calibrated to 40 and 50 foot increase. So it's more in keeping with the real scale of King Street. And I can go on. I appreciate you all letting me have this time to share with you. We have, as Miller mentioned, met. I think we crossed 80 community meetings that we've held at this point with neighborhood groups, as well as stakeholders from the city, from the Preservation Society, Charleston. But really going back over the span of this year, we began those pre-meetings in January and February. The keynote charrette was in March, and we had met with anyone that would listen to us since that, whether it's the neighborhoods, East Side, Canberra, Elliotboro, Radfordboro, North Central. We've worked with the PUD, and we've been working with staff and our stakeholders throughout that process. So it's been a very, very rich and informative process. In fact, I want to thank this commission for taking time for an even longer presentation that we were able to do back in October at the Post and Courier, the old headquarters site. It was wonderful to be in that space that once had 500 people, working and trucks coming in and out, all that industrial path. You could really sort of sense it when you were in that large space. We were in a big sorting room of the old Post and Courier headquarters there at that overview. So thank you all for that. So this is where we come to now, a civic opportunity. As you can see, I am excited about it. It is one of those unparalleled opportunities that we all have together to achieve a new and beautiful park. So with that, back to Miller.
I have an unenviable and difficult task of filling in for James Wilson. I think many of you all have met James along the way. He's been working on our team now for 2 years as part of this. And what he's been helping us do is take all of this vision and design and distill it down into a document, a zoning document that we have to live by. And so I'm going to try to walk you through some of the key components of that. My colleague Katie's going to also take on a couple of those as well. And then obviously, if you all have questions, we're here to go through that. James wishes he could be here, but he is out of town this week. So, it became clear to us through all of these meetings that the best way to effectuate this plan was through a plan unit development, through a PUD. And James likes to say that a PUD is a finely tuned zoning district, and a PUD will allow more precision than a big blanket zoning based district. So with a PUD, you can impose specific requirements and creative options, which is what we try to do in this document. So before you, there are 3 agenda items. First is the PUD itself. Second is a text amendment to the code that create a new height district, which we're calling the height district 12. And then the third is the height map change to rezone our specific property, 134 Columbus, utilizing the new height district. So with any rezoning, James, it goes back and Christian went back to the comprehensive plan. And in this case, the city plan that was adopted by the planning commission and city council. And that city plan identified this district, which is the Kingdom Meeting Corridor, as a city center. This is where it says to be the most dense portions of the city. The tallest buildings would occur here, along with the buildings of the most regional significance. Specifically, section 54306 of the zoning code says calls for height along the spine and going down to the waterfront. So higher structures to be located along the spine streets of the peninsula with height tapering down to the waterfront. And so those documents were our guiding star, if you will, and the starting point for our rezoning process. So the PUD document itself really started with the MU2WH base zoning, and then it made some changes to the MU2WH base zoning to allow for the things that we're talking about. Of course, this property today, as Christopher mentioned, is zoned light industrial. That is obviously not appropriate for today in the urban and civic center area, but it's a leftover zoning category from the prior industrial uses, obviously in the newspaper. So the first and most important part, or one of the most important parts, I keep saying important because it's all important, but the open space and public realm improvements. We've agreed to or written into the document that will be 40,000 square feet, which is nearly 1 acre of 3.7 acres, or approximately 25% of the site. The combination of this open space commitment in conjunction with the new height that Christian talked about is actually giving up more developable area than gaining with height. And that's important. That's hardwired into the new zoning district that we're proposing, that we're going to talk about here in just a bit. Now, the goal of all of that is what Christian just talked about, is really to create better design, more public access, and a real community gathering place. So what do we mean by open space? It means that it's publicly accessible It's outdoor space, envision plazas, arcades, landscaping pavilions, and dining. And it also is to be activated. So as Krista mentioned, you know, activated for us means removing the parking underground, so that makes the site permeable. So you can really go across King Street to the low line in multiple different areas. There's all going to be lots of different uses, so a lot of ways for people to engage with our site as well as public space and the low line itself. The expanded sidewalks on King Street, Columbus, and Line Street, and then dedicating more right of way on King Street. The dedication of more right of way on King Street is really is important because I think this is one of 2 blocks or so that doesn't have on-street parking on King Street. And it'll act as a calming effect, we believe. So when people come onto the peninsula for 26 or 17 and there's parking on the street, it shouldn't hopefully slow the cars down as well. It's very important to us that a majority of this new open space will integrate with the low line, as Christian talked about. The city owns the low line today, obviously, but it's not been improved yet. So with our public space and the low line will form this new public space, which we're calling Courier Square. And it'll be a transition point on the low line from the more park area of the low line down to the more urban district, south of Line Street, down to Marion Square. And hopefully with our property, the Courier Square and the Marion Square will have 2 important bookends of that urban portion of the low line. So part of our HUD and in the documentation, we made a commitment to funding $2 million to improve the low line. So we'll help the city design and construct and build the low line itself. That's separate from the public space that we're doing, which we're obviously going to improve as well. That's going to be part of an agreement where we also will share stormwater. So we'll build stormwater underneath the low line that will service our property as well as the low line property, and then we'll build it back with this $2 million commitment. That'll be handled in another agreement, but we made the commitment within the pledge document, so it lived here as well. And I think that's really the centerpiece of the proposal, and we keep reiterating. I mean, that's this public space with this new landmark building that makes this an important public space on King Street. The second portion of the PUD is the accommodations use. So we're currently zoned A1. And A1, as you all know, allows for multiple 50-room hotels. On 3.7 acres, we could have at least several hotels on the site. So what we have worked with the city to do is we're changing that to a max of 150 accommodations units across the entire site. That creates a hard cap that could be located in 1 or 2 buildings. We think that allows for a better overall plan for the whole site by allowing it to be integrated with the other buildings and providing hospitality services throughout. We think that maintains rough equivalency of what, permitted hotel rooms we would be doing. We don't think we're expanding with 150 units over what would be permitted. And it's better not to have the multiple drop-offs and to create better traffic flow having it in one central location. The city asked for us as part of our discussions with them to also to have a cap on STR. So we would not have any STR. The 150 accommodations units is the most accommodations units will have, even though we are currently in that STR overlay zone. But none of our other residential units will have the ability to be STR. So with the accommodations, east-west, I've showed you some of our pictures out in Beaver Creek and in Denver. We are used to doing these types of public spaces, and we created public-private partnerships. Hospitality is just a really important part of that. You can't create a living room without having service and a hospitality component. So that's important for us. Now I'm going to give Katie a quick chance to do the last 2 points and we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. I'm Katie with East West Partners. So next I'm going to talk about our workforce housing strategy. We think this is an exciting and important part of our PUD and our project. So as Miller mentioned, our starting point for this PUD is the MU2 WH rules. And so under MU2 WH, 20% of all residential units should be set aside for workforce housing units for up to 30 years, or a developer has an option to do a payment in lieu. So we think our approach goes above and beyond the MU2WH, and our approach has three parts. So first of all, we would propose to do 25% of our requirement on site with on-site affordable workforce housing and not through a payment in lieu. Next, we are proposing to meet 50% of our requirement by providing off-site affordable housing, and this is currently in a partnership with Star Gospel Mission. So Star Gospel Mission is across Meeting Street, part of the neighborhood. We are really excited about this partnership for a number of reasons. First of all, the units over at Star Gospel Mission will be workforce housing units in perpetuity, so not just for 30 years. Secondly, these units would provide homes for more lower income residents. So MU2WH is at 80% AMI, whereas at least half the units over at the Star Gospel Mission would be for 60% AMI. And finally, we believe we can deliver these units much earlier than our project. So we've been working closely with Reverend Dr. Platt, the Star Gospel Mission, our architects and city staff to work on a conceptual plan. And we're excited to get this moving as soon as possible. The third way we're planning to meet this requirement, or we've originally proposed to meet this requirement, is through what we've been calling attainable retail. And this is essentially a discounted rent retail space on our site. And this provides for more smaller, local, diverse businesses to really have a presence on King Street. Our goal here is to bring back the diversity that was on King Street not that long ago. This idea was actually born out of conversations with our various neighborhood groups. And as Miller mentioned, this is actually called for in the city comprehensive plan. So while we are excited about this, we do completely respect the city's desire for workforce housing. So we've gone back and revised the PUD to state that we can meet this remaining 25% requirement either through the attainable retail strategy at the city's discretion, or if they prefer, we can do workforce housing. But we'd like to keep that flexibility within the PUD. So that is our workforce housing strategy. And next, I'm going to talk about our new proposed height district. So this is Height District 812. And this height district is really modeled after the Upper Peninsula UP Height District 412. So we tried to borrow from that height district and create a similar concept. So the UP 412 district has requirements for various items such as workforce housing, open space, sustainable development. For anyone that wants to do the new height district 812, they would have to have meet similar requirements. So the requirements we've outlined include a commitment to at least 20% open space as well as workforce housing. And this height district can only be requested in conjunction with a PUD that implements these things in a manner that is satisfactory to the city and ultimately city council. So whatever the city wants to do with regards to items such as open space and workforce housing would be the requirement. Also, there is a minimum requirement for 3.5 acres of for 3.5 contiguous acres. There's good reason for this. So we think if having this on a smaller site with one building, for example, would not really make sense for the 20% open space requirement. If it's just on a smaller site, it's not very impactful. Whereas on 3.5 acres, it is much more impactful in terms of the public space provided. Also, a larger site allows for real variations, not only in building heights, but in building footprints. And we've tried to build this into the height district with percentage limitations with different height stories within the district. And so we're saying that, that at most 40% of the total height can take advantage of the 9, 10, or 12 stories, and the remaining 60% has to remain at 8 stories or lower. So in addition, we put sublimits on how much of the site can use these additional stories. So for example, only the 12-story district cannot be more than 50% of the site, 15% of the site. And we've started to call these micro height districts as it allows planning to get granular. We think of this as the opposite of the large single height districts, which can often and unfortunately produce large mass uniform buildings. Also, only properties that are already zoned 8 stories can apply for this, and again, it has to be in conjunction with a PUD. And in addition, we have built in a required 20-foot setback and spacing between the taller buildings. The idea there being to require the distinct building masses. And finally, and I believe most importantly, the height district has to result in a net reduction in developable square footage, as Christian had mentioned. So we have to give up more developable square footage than we're gaining with the additional height. So the open space and the buildings below 8 stories have to outweigh the additional height above 8 stories. So through this height district and through the concepts that are built into the PUD, our goal is to really strengthen the BAR's authority to hold us accountable to what we are proposing here. So that's the height district. Next, I'm going to introduce a short video that Reverend Dr. Platt has prepared for us since he is out of town, and then we'll wrap up. So thank you for sticking with us. I might need to help with the video.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
If you stop sharing, I can.
My name is
You don't have to keep anybody longer if it's difficult.
We get some.
Yeah, obviously in support of this.
Can we just real quickly summarize? We've been partners with Star Gospel for probably about 70 years, and excited with Dr. Platt to really create some affordable housing that helps their mission and also helps affordable housing in Charleston. He's a much better presenter than I am, and he's enthusiastic about the project, and we're enthusiastic about helping him make this happen. So
You've been a strong supporter of Star also as long as I can remember.
yes, yeah, that's right. Charlie, we've been over 70+ years, I think.
Thank
I think they're a charity that's been around for over 100 years.
you. You good?
Yeah, but I was just gonna say last thing, just to wrap it up, and again, thank you all for your patience. So after now 80+ meetings with stakeholders in the community, to reinforce how important this opportunity what is for us and is for Charleston, and we believe our plan is a reflection of all of this input that we've gotten from various people. We think it's responsive urban design, which we accomplished through the micro height district, which allows 15% of the site to be at 12 stories from multiple buildings and varied skylines, creating an overall reduction in that allowable density. 1 acre public space and open space, 25% of our site area, wider sidewalks and more clean streets, and then all creating a unique public square for Charleston and a catalyst for the low line. So for us, and I think for the planning commission committee, I think that the real question is having an important landmark building centered on a public square in this location, good urban planning for Charleston. And we believe it is.
Thank you. Thank you for all this information. Very good.
Thank you.
So I'd ask is anyone here that would like to speak in favor of these applications? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Mr. Chairman, and board commission members, my name is Marion Hawkins, president of Canberra Ellingworth Neighborhood Association. This entire development of Courier Square lies in our neighborhood, and we do want to thank Evening Post Industries for their engagement with our neighborhood throughout all 3 phases, and several items which they have responded to us is the affordable housing component, the restriction of late night businesses, and also prohibiting STRs in the housing units, which are zoned commercial. So we greatly appreciate those things they've offered to us in the previous two phases. And we also have interacted with the team, Christian Steele, Mel Harper, and James Wilson. They've done a couple presentations. In our last presentation at our neighborhood meeting on October 2nd, the neighborhood heard the entire presentation as you have. And we were very much in favor of the, we appreciate the Star Gospel component, sharing the affordable housing with them for their mission as well, especially the attainable retail, which to me, to our neighborhood is bringing, helping local businesses stay viable and giving them a great option. Anyway, and we did hear about the novel concept of the differing heights in the PUD documents. So basically at our meeting, we voted completely in favor to support the project. And we would greatly encourage the commission to give approval to that.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight. Anyone else in favor of the application? Yes, sir. You in favor? Come on up and talk. Thank you, sir.
That's a surprising favor. Anthony G. Bryant, 2123 Cortland Avenue, drop up in 29403. I actually formerly served on the board of zoning appeals in Charleston County for many years. And you approve things, approving it, you approve it with conditions, or you deny it, based upon what I can see in 2000. Basically 2000, when I took this picture years ago, when the old Postal Curry was there, all the players were there. Tony Bartleby was still there. Ollie Porter's gone. I knew many of the guys who worked at the Post back then, and they were very fair in terms of their coverage of our community in that period of time. We never defined clearly in Charleston or on the state level what growth is. I think the problem we have with the Plan of Neighborhood Act 1994 was it didn't clearly define what growth was. So we had to kind of go off on our own, having the Ashley River and Cooper River and having the Atlantic Ocean puts us in a really great position to do these great things. Other parts of the state are not as fortunate as we are. I believe that the Post and Courier always, we went to 20 years ago, they were open to work with Ebenezer Church and other people, but they're just one company, just one organization. They shouldn't be responsible for all the ills and errors of others. I think that what I see and I hear in the continuum of care is very important because the continuum of care is about caring about the whole community. And they've done that in the errors in their own history with 1928 Euclid versus Avenue Company. That began restricted covenants in the 1920s. Also, the red line it wasn't a part of the red line in the banks or insurance companies. We face that as well. We hope that the Post and Courier and others say, what is growth? What really is growth in this state? What does it mean now? After the incentives of the enterprise zone, empowerment zones, opportunity zones with Senator Scott that did not have any reporting with the IRS in terms of how the incentives will work, whether it be in reverse, or whatever. So the incentives that we have on a federal and state level doesn't reflect really any real outcomes for the people that really need it the most. As we celebrate this holiday, 650,000 people in this country probably homeless. Close to 1 million Americans today will not be in a house for Christmas. That is horrible. What I hear tonight is a private corporation saying, well, we're gonna try to do something about that in our own way with our property. And I think that people thought I was gonna be against this project. I wasn't ever against it. I know the players in the Post for years who covered poor folks. And they care about poor people. But there's one corporation. One corporation can't take care of this problem. I know that my dear friend will do his part and champion dealing with this Cartney House issue in this country, in the community. I mean, East-West Partners came in like 2000, Raleigh was married. I remember Joe Raleigh told me this, he said, Tony, there's 4 things city can do. It can have a vision, it can approve the vision, it can construct it, and hopefully include some people. I think Mayor Raleigh always wanted to include Black folk. He got in 1974, he won the Black vote, the largest percentage ever. He did his part. Did the state do their part? I don't know. Federal government did their part? Tried. But you do your part, you did. You can't stop growth. What you can do is you can mitigate it to the best of your ability. I mean, and I'm a big proponent at city council meetings for dissent. Now, when the governor or anybody that says a person's against something, if I was against this, which I'm not against this, you can't have a governor take sides with people and disqualify people's speech. We have no law in South Carolina for someone to dissent against something, and the federal government, Department of Justice, protect that speech, protect that redress. Not available. At their discretion to affect your person, to affect your property, to affect your name, observe you, surveil you, and arrest you. How I know that? Happened to me, it's right there. I'm a Charlestonian, a pride Charlestonian in the Peninsula, grew up my whole life in the Peninsula, and I'm gonna conduct myself like Peninsula Charlestonian and ask for relief for those people who dissent appropriately. Have a great holiday and all the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming out tonight too. Always well said. Anyone else in support of the application? Yes, ma'am. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Jane Jenkins and I reside at 156C Trad Street currently. I am the founder and principal of Jane Jenkins Resources, and I'm here tonight as a consultant with over 40 years of experience in the public sector as an urban place manager and downtown development expert, including 8 years as the historic preservation officer for the city of Denton, Texas, and 3 years as the director of the Southwest office for the National Trust for Historic Preservation. If Texas sounds like a new state to South Carolinians, know that I grew up in Mount Pleasant at a time when a rite of passage for any East Cooper kid with a driver's license was driving to downtown Charleston across the Grace Memorial Bridge. I am speaking in support of this project as I believe it is a thoughtful project. It is well researched. It's been extremely publicly vetted. They are giving back to the community and every single aspect with their contributions to the low line. And I really want to call out, there are 2 really special aspects to this project that that are kind of not in downtown right now. And that is underground parking, which is fabulous, and attainable retail. And I know someone mentioned that. I can't tell you how important that is right now in an area where we're losing many of our local businesses because credit tenants are the only ones that can afford the current rents on King Street. This attainable retail concept is new in downtown, and it really speaks to, I mean, it's new in downtown management nationwide. And it really speaks to an incredible need that we have in downtown Charleston. I just want to call out, Christian mentioned that the project in Savannah was the recipient of a global award from the Urban Land Institute. And I was on the jury for that project. And I want to tell you, if you haven't been to Plant Riverside in Savannah, you need to go and you need to see the quality and the thoughtfulness and the attention to detail that they will bring to this project on Upper King. I support.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for coming out. Yes, Mr. Parker, come on up, Scott.
Thank you. So, my name is Scott Parker, and I would like to say a lot of wonderful things about the project, but as a member of the design team, I feel that's inappropriate. But I am a member of the board of the Friends of the Lowline. So I speak to you, all of you tonight in that capacity. The Lowline has been a dream for this city for a very long time. And this project really represents the first opportunity for that Lowline to really become a reality. So it's a real public-private partnership, the way we always intended it to be. And for many reasons, but especially for the Lowline, I want to speak in favor of the project.
Thank you for coming out. Yes, anyone else? Perhaps come on up. Good to see you. Come on up.
Thank you. My name is Ray Huff. I'm a resident here in Charleston. I wanted to commend the postcard for this rather exciting proposal, as well as East-West Partners and my colleague, Kristen Sotil, who is an excellent, highly regarded witness. It's demonstrated in what we've seen tonight. So I think there are a couple of things that I do want to speak to. That is the importance that's stressed in their particular proposal to mitigating this issue of 7-story limits to buildings. That we're losing our skyline in many ways. We're creating platforms as opposed to punctuations of a 3, 4, 5-story down, which is the legacy of this urban community. So I think that's something we got to look at more broadly in terms of other initiatives that we'll see coming on in place. So I think they recognize that and do that quite well. They also, the idea of creating public space to the extent that they proposed, I think is excellent. However, I have one caution in that it concerns me the internalization of the public space. And what that means is it's public space because the public is allowed to be there. It's actually privately owned space. And so there's a sense in, I think, the American character that you feel more comfortable if you're in a space in which you think you belong. But you don't necessarily feel as comfortable in a space that's more closeted or cloistered. And I think that's a concern that needs to be looked at. We also risk, I think, to some degree, of taking some of the energy and activity off of Columbus and King Street. Now, perhaps that's not the case, but I just wanted to offer that one caution in what is otherwise an extraordinarily successful and highly regarded, I think, proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. Anyone else in support of the application? If not, anyone who has concerns or in opposition? Yes, ma'am. Mr. Olay, or, yeah, either way. Mr. Olay, come on. Either way. Thank you.
Erin Mahard with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. I just want to start off by saying that the Preservation Society appreciates the project team for being in close communication with us throughout this process and for the due diligence they've undertaken to gather community input and craft a thoughtful proposal. This redevelopment will be transformational for Charleston as the final piece of the Courier Square puzzle, and it deserves a project of the highest quality. Befitting of a PUD rezoning, there are many creative and unique elements to the proposal that will benefit the community, including affordable housing and enhanced green and enhanced open space. We see a great opportunity here for placemaking that could spark the development of the low line. However, we cannot support a height district amendment that would allow up to 12 stories on the site, which is 4 stories greater than that allowed under current zoning. Our ordinances were created through public processes to ensure predictability for new development. Rewriting the code in response to a development request without specific reference to a directive from the city's guiding planning documents is bad practice. This will set a dangerous precedent with consequences beyond this project, opening the gates for increasingly substantial height requests in the future. It's not appropriate to amend our code to meet developers' goals. Conversely, new development should fit within the community's vision for its future. We currently are undergoing a process to update the city's peninsula plan, which will set goals for the next decade of development downtown with a close eye on sensitive ways to incorporate density at scale. This is the type of public process that should occur to inform major policy changes based on open community conversation. As the Planning Commission, we ask you to uphold the integrity of our ordinances and recommend disapproval of the proposed height district amendment. We see a path forward for a PUD to guide exceptional development on the site, but feel the proposed height should meet existing code requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for coming. Mr. Olay, come on up.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Captain Olay with the Short Charleston Foundation, 40 Space Street. On behalf of the foundation, we are very grateful for the many meetings and opportunities the applicant provided us to review and provide feedback on the project over the course of its development, frankly, since its advent. It is clear that they've put significant time, thought, effort into this project, and we applaud the team for the exceptional public engagement and creative approach to redevelopment of this really important site in Charleston's Midtown. We're also excited about their commitment to workforce housing, the peninsula's potentially first attainable retail space, and the major contributions to the public realm. We have been working with the applicant over the last couple of months to find ways to ensure that through this major rezoning process, that the end result will be what has been described to us and what has been promised to us. The applicant has been incredibly open and amenable to suggestions, many of which are in the PUD document and in the height zoning ordinance before you this evening. Through our collaboration, just highlighting a couple of things in their PUD application are enhanced and expanded design principles to ensure that the development adheres to Charleston's high architectural standards. Clarification on the programming for the open space to ensure that it truly feels public and provides unfettered access to the Lowcountry lowline. Clarification on the purview and powers of the BAR in reviewing this process and retaining their ability to sculpt and mold around the tops of the buildings. Narrowed eligibility for rezoning into the A12 height district and limiting additional square footage that you could achieve through the 812 height district so that it's not an equal or one-for-one trade-off between height and open space. However, we do remain concerned about the height proposed for the project as it's a deviation from the only recently created Old City Height District and what this change means for not just this project, but also the implications for future projects. At up to 12 stories, Courier Square 3 is requesting up to 50% more height than is currently allowable. And these would be among the tallest buildings on the peninsula. The applicant has created 3D massing studies that have from various viewpoints that have really helped with our understanding of their proposal in the context of the surrounding blocks. But we remain concerned by the height, particularly at the northeast corner of the site where the predominant height is 10 and 12 stories. The applicant has taken great pains to ensure that their project would present a varied and articulated skyline for the built-out project. However, we're not able to support the increased height proposed. We have concerns about light and shadow, the assembly of the site's tallest buildings at one corner of the site, and the intensification of height and density in this portion of the peninsula. So therefore, we would support the site's current height zoning at 8 stories. That's what the current zoning would allow, with an additional story to be achieved through architectural merit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Earl. Thank you for coming out as always. Anyone else that has concerns or an opposition? If not, we'd ask Mr. Owens or whoever else would like to, any final words or any addressing it?
Commenters, certainly we appreciate everyone that's been with us from the beginning through this long road of the process. We appreciate it. One thing about open space we think is very, very important. For a question, how public is that open space? I think it's about 2 pages of text dedicated to that in the PUD. We spent a lot of time really. Actually, we thought about PUD to really stand for principles for what the project is about. But we do wholeheartedly understand that comment and very respectful. Understanding the importance of creating truly accessible, comfortable public place without compromising public streets. That we talked about increasing this sidewalk all the way around the site. In terms of the height, no question, height is a lightning rod, and we knew it when we started. Which is why what we presented is so carefully crafted for that very reason. When we looked at when Charleston has done height the old one, it's usually that. 14 stories on King Street next to 3-story buildings. It's 3 or 4 times taller than what's around the people. So that's bold. I would say we are being quite so bold. We are in a city of 8-story buildings and 9-story buildings. And so we realized during the design process, this effort would be futile without proper variation. And we started working those increments of 8, 10, 12, so that you actually could do what we set out to do, and not across the whole site. And I really want to reinforce that. I know our stakeholders here understand this, but this isn't about a 12-story high zone. It's about creating one opportunity for one building to be a landmark building. It's funny, in zoning, we talk about abstraction, we talk about open space. open space is really very nebulous. This is a public square. Like, if we go out on the weekend and say we're gonna have a picnic, or where are we gonna have that? Oh, in the open space. We're gonna have it in a park, or we're gonna have it, we're gonna take a walk in a square, or we're gonna go to a plaza. So this is a place, this is a square. But we express it as open space in the zoning document. We express height as height zone. We're talking about one building. It's actually, the number 12 is important because it's actually just 12% of the site. I know that the PUD allows for 15% of the actual zone that we map in our zoning maps, only 12%. So I really think as we look at all these things, light and shadow, we've actually brought buildings, we've created imposed step down on buildings on public streets to actually increase light. We've stepped back from the low light. So all these things are very much on our mind. We know it's an issue that's near and dear to all of us. We want to make sure it's done right. And that's really what this is the abstraction is what's in a zoning document. The reality is a new public square and a new landmark building.
Thank you, Mr. Sill. That'll close the public aspect of this, and now we'll talk over the commission members. I do want to thank folks from the development team. I think it was said by the Coastal Preservation Society and the North Charleston. The community outreach was good. It's obvious. I was telling the Vice Chairman was saying that I thought we'd have more people here, and probably the reason we don't is there was so much discussion before, which is always good to see. Always good to see. Commission members, questions, comments, Mr. Bailey?
Mainly comments. As I watched the video of your special meeting and then heard your comments today, and you finally got around to saying this really is mainly about technical tonight, but I gave you all this background. And during all of that, I was kind of jealous of like BAR folks because that stuff is sexy. And our job is to try to figure out whether or not all that sexy is translated into this boring document. And I kind of hoped that Mr. Wilson would be here tonight, and I got Mr. Harper, but that's okay. But as I listened to all of the first presentation and then the presentation tonight, I thought, if it works out exactly the way that has been described, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Any controversy, I think, is only about height. And when you look around at the big buildings that have been built, I understand why height is controversial. And so your effort is the most serious that I have seen to try to articulate how you build a more attractive big building. I think that's our city's biggest failing from a design standpoint in the past however many years, is we haven't been.
What do we hear, scale?
We haven't been particularly good at building big buildings. So I sure hope that what is outlined in that legal document that we're being asked to vote on does create, I think you called it taller but smaller, and micro height zones. I hope that that's accurate. And so as I think about how I feel about this, and really this is just a comment, and I wanted to hear other commissioners, but if we are gonna try to do something bold or allow something bold, in this case, we have a great local owner who's long time committed to the community. We have a great development team. It's been here. You're almost a local, long enough. A great design team. We have a supportive neighborhood. We have a supportive planning staff. They've been through it. So we check a lot of boxes of important supporters, and we don't have a room full of people upset. And so I think if we're ever going to take a chance that the legal document does deliver on what we've seen, this is one where we do take that chance. So that's kind of where I'm leaning at this.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Ms. Lassane or Ms. Lempsis, either one.
Well, no, I was gonna say, Jimmy echoed everything that I was thinking. My family had a business at the corner of East Columbus and East Bay Street for many years.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was wonderful and it was also tragic.
Yep.
With my family too there, because my father died on the corner of Columbus and East Bay Street. And, but I spent a lot of time there at Mr. Cordonus's grocery store and grew up and really so happy
Remember that.
to see something as powerful and bold as this plan to go there. And I 12 stories, I get it. It doesn't sound good. It sounds terrible, actually, from our perspective, and adding 4 more stories to our zoning code. However, if you're going to do it, and if you're going to do it with a team that is local involved, that is the spot to do it. It is in the center. It's not, you can't see it from the water. You can't see it from, it's opening up a new section, a new square, and expanding Charleston. And I would be in support of this application.
Thank you, Ms. Lempsis. Mr. Lassane?
Thank you. I just want to say, I kind of echo what Jimmy said, Mr. Bailey, excuse me. That how often do we get to have a really in-depth conversation at the Planning Commission about urban design? You know, it almost never happens. We're usually talking about, well, should it be light industrial or heavy industrial? Or, you know, and the reason why we're talking about that here is because this team has put so much time and effort into a finely crafted design. These PUD documents, just as usual, Jimmy and I often echo each other, but these documents reflect a whole lot of work. And when there's another big project in the community that's been a big point of discussion that could take some lessons from the way this team went about putting this project together. And for all the reasons that we all know. So I just think it's wonderful. I personally appreciate all the references to Mayor Riley that we've heard tonight, because I think it's important that we keep his principles about how he wanted the city designed front and center in our minds. The height is obviously something that everybody is concerned about. You know, just exactly as Mr. Bailey said, and my colleague Sunday Lempis, if anybody's going to do height well, it's going to be this team. The Guild building is probably one of the most handsome buildings that's been built in this city in the last 15 years. And I personally like the new Lifestyles building that's going to be right across Line Street that's going up now. So I think that, you know, there'll be a critical mass of some taller buildings in that spot, but as Ms. Lempis says, that's where they ought to be if we're going to have them in the city. The other thing about it is they've broken up this height. We heard that a lot from a number of groups on some other projects that have been before us recently about, you know, the height being too masked, and they've done I think a really wonderful job doing that. I also want to mention the low line. My colleague Scott Parker and I have been on that board along with Ray Huff, who served for a while. I've been on it 11 years. And this is going to be the first piece that will actually get constructed. And I'm really, really excited and happy about that. So thank you to Ron, who's also on the board as well, for all he's done for that. And then finally, I want to just commend them for bringing the idea of affordable retail to us, or attainable retail. As those of us who've been here a long time know, King Street, you know, that particularly that part of King Street, since I've been in Charleston, was much more diverse than it is now. And that's, you know, we're going to hear this. These folks have brought it to us, but we're going to be hearing this a lot in the future, that we talk a lot about housing, but having, you know, opportunities for folks to own businesses in the center of our city and share in the wealth building opportunities that are there for business owners, I think is an idea whose time has come. So I am very, very grateful for y'all bringing that to us. And it's just another way that this project is a model for how these kinds of things get done. So I'm fully in support and I appreciate the great hard work of the team.
Great. Ms. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I took the opportunity to go and pull out a study that Mr. Ray Huff, if he's still in the room, I think he left. His studio actually did in 2006 for this site. It was all 3 sites they were looking at. And I copied the beginning of it because I wanted to bring it here tonight after looking at this, because it says some things in here that were really important that I heard tonight, which is interesting 17 years later that we're hearing this in a PUD. It talked about having a civic responsibility for the site, which I think has gone into this. It talked about putting in transparency into the situation. It talked about having affordable housing in the development of the site. It talked about public use in the development of the site. And it talked about what they at the time called the rail right-of-way or the green axis. That's what they called it 17 years ago. So even 17 years ago brought forward is a document. And also what's very interesting in this document, which sort of struck me when I saw your presentation before in the previous downtown plan, was this 3 nodes of central space, which you talk about Charleston Place, or maybe even our corners of law. We talk about Marion Square, and this would be an upper connection zone along the spine. So I found it kind of refreshing that some great ideas just stay there and it takes a while to bring them to fruition. So I wanted to mention that document. In addition, I'm going to echo what my colleagues have said, because I think it's important when you see something good, everybody should say something good. And then I have a few questions that I usually do. I loved the fact that you put in the PUD you're going to have a diversity of housing, because that's one thing we need, not just affordable housing, but we get, duplexes and triplexes and not just everything in a monosyllabic version called single family residential. I think we do need that diversity of housing. I'm glad you stated it. And very interested in everything you said about affordable housing and workforce housing. And I'm also extremely interested in this attainable retail also. I've spoken about this, as we all have, during the comp plan. I actually, during your presentation before, mentioned to Mr. Wilson about what I saw up in Greenville, about how they incorporated some of that along the Swamp Rabbit Trail to create some vitality along that trail. I pointed to him directly about that. My concern in this document, though, is the way it's put together is like, who's going to get to apply for this? I mean, I'm sort of gotten into the weeds a little bit about that, which I had some concerns about it. And I know the city is really pushing everything toward affordable housing. So what I would like to respectfully ask is that we do continue with this initiative of attainable retail, but maybe just find a place where it can be a prototype within the community, because a lot of those businesses along King Street originally was work on the first floor, live on the second floor. So I don't know if there's a way to incorporate anywhere in the design that there's just a prototype for what that might look like, and it maybe stay in perpetuity, maybe not commit any square footage, help the city with a greater percentage of their affordable housing. But let's show the community what attainable retail looks like. You have to start somewhere and actually do it. If you leave too much flexibility in the document, it's all going to get pushed to affordable housing. And then we're going to lose this opportunity that we talked about. So I think we just need to tweak how that looks legally. It's not my purview to suggest that. I'm very excited that you put so much into the public realm. And that moves toward height. In other words, to give us the things we want, like affordable housing, underground parking, which is the woman that spoke, there's a lot of underground parking downtown. Most people don't realize there's about 6 or 8 sites of it. But to give us the underground parking and to give us affordable housing and to give us public realm, for you to have something to work on the site, we're going to have to get tight. With that said, I went around the city myself and just looked at iconic buildings. Now you referenced the Francis Marion, but if you look at Marion Square, which is a square, one of your nodes that you talked about, it is 10 acres though. But around that 10 acres is a 12-story building, the Francis Marion, a 7-story building, the Dewberry, a 9-story building, the Bennett, a 5-story building, the historic embassy, and 2 very tall churches, Citadel Square and St. Matthew's Lutheran around the square. So when Charleston was just nothing and we developed it, 3 stories were high. And there's several iconic buildings throughout there. So I think the part that Mr. Bailey said about he wishes with the BAR right now, because that's all where all the funds going to be about this. We just have to make sure that it's appropriate. And I think that the diversity of the way you scale the height makes it appropriate. I very much appreciate the comments by the Preservation Society and Historic Charleston, because I also worry when we go in and okay, we're going to make an exception to the rule for this one developer. Do we set ourselves up for something? But when I read this exception here, it's so specific and written to ways it's going to be different for somebody else to meet these requirements. And if they want to, they're going to have to be very good for our community also. In addition, I just wanted to ask the city, do we know where Upper Peninsula zoning boundary kind of begins? Is it drawn or is it loosey-goosey?
As far as the UP Upper Peninsula, zone,
Right.
so the lowest or most southern portion of that is the Morrison Yard site, which was not in our original Upper Peninsula study, but that was because it was owned by the port. We did not anticipate that the port was going to be selling that land. And when they put it up for sale, we looked at the Upper Peninsula and thought it was the most.
So there is a hard border.
So that is the most southern that it would ever go, I think.
But I don't think it's wrong for these kinds of developments along our very active spine to look toward what the city did in that area and take guidance from it, which is exactly what they've suggested that they've done in order to make, in other words, this is like push me, pull you. If we want these other things, we've got to give some other things to make it work. One question for the team, the $2 million that you're committing to the low line, is there a timing for when that is going to be put in bank so that, has that been stated at all? I was just curious. If that's something you can say on the record.
Any other questions for them? Because let's let them all answer at once. And
Okay,
any other questions for them, get them all out and let them know.
Okay, I'm working on it, Georgie. I know how you work. I'm working on it. You know me, I'm in the details here. Let's let me look through here really quick to see if I had anything else I wanted to ask. I may have hit all my points. I think I have. The biggest thing is the affordable housing and the attainable retail. There's a way to tweak that to where we kind of get more toward what the city wants with their percentages. So I know we're in crisis and we've all heard the crisis and what we need. But this attainable retail is just too much fun and too important also to not at least begin somehow. So I'll stop with that and ask about.
Yes, sir.
2 million.
Hold on.
Yeah, so first, we heard your comment on the Greenville property. I know those developers well. I reached out to them about it. I hadn't got a call back yet. I had a feeling that was gonna come back up, but we will talk to them about that. That's Bob Hughes and I grew up in Greenville, so I know that family. But we'll talk to them about the application process. We've also talked to Local First about how they think about that process. And then obviously working with the city of Charleston. And then the bud itself, it talks about, the city of Charleston proposing applicants for it. So that'll be a process that we'll work through with them. It's a new concept and we're kind of writing it up. But we'll welcome feedback from the city and from the community on it. In terms of the low line commitment, that's going to actually be documented in a separate agreement along with the stormwater. It is the $2 million amount. Our plan is to build the low line with our construction, because we'll be doing the site work and the stormwater work all with our development. Okay. So that's when that will happen. We will spend the money at the time of development.
So the stormwater and the low line are coming together in one package together.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other commission members? Yes, ma'am.
So thanks so much for your presentation. I think that we all agree that this is, clearly the result of deliberate community engagement and planning and design and all that. And as you guys have heard, my family and I walk a lot. My husband works at Greystar, so we just live a mile up the road basically from there. walk that all the time and I'm very excited for the low line and those improvements. It'll be so nice to walk through that. I did, like everyone else, have a little bit of a question and about the height, which is always a concern. But so I love the idea of this taller but smaller. I think that that's a great way to just minimize, obviously, scale and bulk of these buildings. I think like 3 questions. So the first one is on King Street, do the heights, I think you said that they do this, but do the heights sort of taper down as you get on sort of the ones that are directly on King, that face King? Do those go, you might have an 8-story building, but is the frontage like maybe 4 stories or 5, so just lowers it?
Okay.
slightly?
Go ahead. Yes, sir. You go ahead.
Sure, so along King Street, the heights are 4,
Okay,
5,
Mhm.
3,
got it.
4, 5. And then there's one 6-story
Mhm.
at the corner when you enter the lower peninsula, sort of at that gateway.
Right.
But yeah, all of King is really designed to be kind of
Mhm.
to look on the other side.
Okay, that answers that. And then, I know that you said the one 12-story building is 12% and it's it'd be one building, I think is the intent. And I know that when you're comparing percentage of buildable area with actual structures, that's not, it's sort of apples and oranges, they're not quite the same thing. Do you know approximately how many buildings, I think there was a slide with it, would be 10 stories? Would be 9 stories, or what your intent is? I know it's not fully designed yet.
There's really only one building that would be 12 stories, that is at 12% of the site. That's along the middle line, so it's
Mhm.
very center of the center. of the
Right.
center.
Okay,
Then
so
there-
it'd be, that one would be that,
Yeah.
then,
You could go back to, well, I can, without the roof line, but this is that one. Then there are 2 zones that would have the 10 stories, one zone here in the middle of the farm, so it's sort of tapered away from the edge.
okay,
There's another zone here also. And then the third zone, which is the 9-story zone, is an element of the site.
the center there, and then it sort of tapers down.
So the trend is for the taller massing to be congregated toward the.
Thank you. And then my final question is just in regard to how the proposed height district amendment is written. Because just the amount of work that's gone into this, like, it's clear what the intent is behind creating the articulated skyline and, you know, taller, smaller, all that. But you have, so it's 40% of the total land area cannot exceed the 12 stories. It's like sort of how it's written. I mean, that's a simplified version of that, but it's only 40% of that. And then within that 40%, there's 20% can be 8 to 9, 20% could be, I think, 10 max, and then that 15%, which is really 12%, the one single 12-story building within. So the remaining 60%, the way it's written is still allowed to have 8 stories with the permissible 9th. So or no?
It really wouldn't.
Okay.
Because what we've done is we've shaped the entire site. So
Mhm.
first of all, like having that taper of open space that actually forces it down to 0.
Okay.
For one. And then as we move across the site, we, of course, we always talk about the taller buildings, but the whole time, but we shape the height everywhere on the site. So for example, this portion of the site, the front is 8.1, well, now it's going to be 3 or 0. And so, and along the street, actually, we got that line along the street block. Setbacks and those side trees don't feel a little kind of, I think that's kind of weakness.
Yeah.
You end up with a good balance on Main Street and it jumps up.
Right.
On side streets, so it kind of, it throws it all. So we use this opportunity to really affect a total urban design, really think about where it should be everywhere. So that micro height zone map works with, it really sets height across. The percentage of, just to clarify, that the 812 zones that are in there can be no more than 40% site in total. But then they're broken down into maximum. So that, for example, that single building, also a building, a maximum of 15. When we ran the map on the actual map, it's actually.
Right.
The fourth one that we got to 10. is, can be up to, 20%, I think it's 16, and I think in actuality. And, the portion that could be 9 stories, is actually really already technically limited to that. But, that can be up to 20%, it's only 6.
Okay.
So it's, they're modest, and we really let the design guide it, and then working with the zoning police and working with James Wilson to ensure that everything could be expressed technically, but the map actually ultimately governs, the map that would be part of the zoning will lock in, sort of like vacuum packing.
But if somebody,
So-
right, but if someone wanted to take this and apply it to another 3.5 acre property, would there be anything in that that would not allow them to say, okay, we have this 40% of this total land area subject to the PUD, can work with these micro heights, but then the remaining might, if it's in the 8-story height district, could they not just say, but the rest of it will just be 8 stories, so then you get this huge, is there a way to change the language?
And James can speak about this more, but in the document, there's actually a required reduction of capacity.
Okay.
So if you're setting, of course, every project is different. I think it would be very hard to replicate this.
Yeah.
Because of the size of this site, because of its location, this is sort of a once in a lifetime location to do this. But if it were to be, there are governing things in there that require, when you're finished, you actually have less capacity than you started. So you wouldn't really be able to just add height, not add height. You know, open space,
Right,
and then
yeah.
secondarily, I'm sure the capacity and height also grows.
Okay, great, that makes sense.
Just one comment. Sorry. In the document specifically, we state that there has to be a 75%. It can't exceed more than 75% of the original developable area. And then with the open space requirement, you couldn't just have 8 stories in it. So you really have open space, which is 0, then buildings with less square footage to outweigh any additional height you had added to the site.
Got it. That makes, thank you.
And that's why we have an attorney on there. I said,
I didn't read the
read everything.
75%.
She's had a lot of notes on this shit. Anything else? You good?
No, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay.
And I just don't want to echo whatever has already been said because they've all said great things. I do appreciate you guys taking the time out to come out tonight, and that it will be something that seems will be built to scale. And definitely excited about you being the first to develop that load line, which will set the standard for what the rest of the load line will look like. So I'm just excited about the whole project. And thank you.
I didn't want to say, just go ahead.
I just want to have 2 quick questions. The open space in the interior, is that, who's going to maintain?
It'll still be on our property, development property, so it'll be maintained.
So retail and then the public space, would that be maintained by the city?
Yes, the low line portion
Is maintained by the low line, okay. And then the second question is in reference to the on-site workforce housing. Are you excluding the fee in lieu of, or is that included in the on-site?
The 25% on-site requirement would not allow for us to pay the fee in lieu. So we have to do
The on-site, and then you're on the off-site will be on the start hospital. And the retail would be the other part. So you are not able to do the fee in lieu of.
If, for example, is the only thing that includes the fee in lieu is the 25%. We are planning very all in favor of moving forward with Star Gospel for the 50% offsite. We don't own the land, so if something happens out of our control, then we would either look for another partnership within 1,000 square feet of the site, or we pay the fee in lieu.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's still, I mean, I guess I'm trying to
But
find
yeah,
out.
the fee in lieu would still be on the
It's
table
still on the
for
table?
other options, just not the 25% required.
Fee in lieu has gotten us in a lot of trouble because we can't afford to buy anything for affordable housing, and it's really not worked to the benefit of the city.
Well, we want the postal security to take the lead and get, not doing the fee in lieu, but developing property.
Well,
and
that's
get
what I
distracted.
that's what I just asked, and
Yep.
they can still do it, so.
Ms. Jacobs?
So we can do it for only in the instance that Star Gospel or another off-site opportunity that's not paying out.
Okay.
The 25% on-site would do then the last 25%, there's the city's discretion, whether that's attainable retail
Right.
or the on-site workforce housing. And we can't do the feeling for that either.
Okay,
So
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
Which, her question sparked thought I meant to ask, how long, maybe I missed it, how long is the affordability?
It was 30.
On-site is 30, off-site was start off with just perpetuity.
Perpetuity, okay. And one last thing I failed to mention, this is page 6 in the document. There's a paragraph under public realm and open space, and I know Mr. Wilson is not here, and it's so with legalese, I'm having difficulty with it. Do you have the time to look at page 6 in the public realm, because it talks about any and all conveyance of any portion. And it sounds like things can get shifted around, and I just wanted to have a little explanation about that paragraph.
what section are you talking about specifically?
It's land use, section 3.3, title public realm and open space, page 6 of the document that we saw, and I can show you. Where it says any and all conveyances of any portion of a mixed use area or open space subject to these limitations.
Right. So the intent there is, if there was ever a conveyance of the property, these open space requirements would go with that pro rata share of the conveyance.
So in other words, this property could be developed in pieces.
The intent, Evening Post is, own this property forever. And our agreement with them is a 99-year lease. So our intent is to develop it and collectively own it forever. But obviously with financial markets, we have to leave some sort of, in case we have to do one piece before the other. And that's what this is just basically saying, assuring that if a piece went before the other, or if somebody else built a piece, they would have to build their flow at the public space and open space.
Okay, just want to make sure. And last thing that I just thought about, the affordable housing is, this is just me not recalling in the document. Is it diversely through the property, or is it principally in one building?
The way it's written is it will be diverse throughout the property, but it doesn't have to be in every building that has residential. So if there's 5 buildings right now as we've designed it. And so what we've said is it's going to be integrated and diverse throughout, but not every residential building has to have a workforce housing unit.
Okay, I accept that, but we're not going to collapse it all into one building either. Is there some protection against that?
Right now, as designed today, pretty much all the residential sits in one building. So basically our intent as the development plan sits today is to put all of our residents in one building.
Okay, that's okay.
Thank you. Mr. Hussein?
I'd like to make,
You good, Ms. Jacobs?
Yes, I think she just sparked some
Mr.
thoughts.
Hussein, sorry.
I would like to make a motion to approve this item.
I'll second his motion.
There's a motion by Mr. Hussein, second by Ms. Lemphasis, to approve both items. So
We
the,
need to take them separately.
I think we should.
I
I think we could have the 2 separate
Okay.
votes, one on the PUD and one on the
so
ordinance.
the motion,
I also have a question. Is that including any staff recommendations or not? Or?
Yes.
including all of the
Yes.
recommendations.
Can we pull up, could I?
Yeah, because that's.
Absolutely.
100%.
So just to address the staff.
Oh, okay.
This is saying that no attainable retail.
Yeah.
This would remove the attainable retail and we would do that, if that doesn't get, we would like to leave that at the discretion of the city at any given time.
Okay.
And the second part that just want to make sure we're clarifying, Christopher, I don't think we've spoken about this one. They said 50% of the affordable housing at our adopted mission sites. That's our intent, their partnership, our new partnership, we're working with the architects, we're all working in good faith to do that. If something were to happen and you weren't able to do it on that property, we don't want the site to all of a sudden go away. So that condition could limit us if that were the case. So we would have that, and I'm not sure if that was the intent, but that's the way that means to us. So we just wanted to make sure we understood that.
So you're saying that if you couldn't meet the 50% threshold, let's just say you could only get to 45% at Star Gospel, you would then do 55 at the main site?
So what we've said is that 25% is on site. We're gonna do 25%. 25% is either attainable retail or is on site. So if the city determined in its discretion that they wanted no attainable retail, then there would be 50% on site. The other 50%, we want to do it at the hospital. If for some reason that didn't work, then we would want to do it somewhere else off site. But if that didn't work, then we want to have the possibility to see if we have.
And that's all outlined in the.
That's all in the.
Yeah, good point. So perhaps we could modify this to say, and 50% affordable housing at the Star Gospel Mission site or other nearby location. Does that make sense?
The commission agrees with our
Yeah.
recommendation.
Yeah, I'd like to make my motion.
Yeah.
Be with no conditions.
Okay, so the motions, and this is the motion for the rezoning request, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so right now we're talking about rezoning request alone, 134 Columbus Street. And the motion is to approve it with no conditions. Ms. Lampsis, are you still, okay? Second by Ms. Lampsis. Any discussion on that? Not all in favor of the motion by Mr. Singh, second by Ms. Lampsis. Please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition? I say in favor, not opposed. Next item is the ordinance amendment. Number 1. Mr. Singh.
I would like to make a motion to approve that as well, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And second, Ms. Lampsis, you on that? Great, Ms. Lampsis. And let me just comment as well. Thank you for everyone, the patience in going through this stuff. You've spent a lot of time, and again, it's echoed by not having the crowd here, you're going to do the work. So there's a motion by Mr. Lassane, second by Ms. Lampsis, to approve the ordinance amendment number 1. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition? That's 8 in favor, none opposed to that. Thank you all. Thanks for your time, and we look forward to working with you. Mr. Bailey said that VAR so have some fun.
Mr. Chairman, those votes were 7. I'm sorry. They were 7-0.
7 on both of them. Mr. Bailey had left. 7 in favor on both of those, so none opposed. Thank you all.
No, not at all.
So the next item on the agenda, we had a deferral on the rezoning and a deferral on the residential subdivision. Next is the ordinance amendment number 2 to amend chapter 54. Code of the City of Charleston zoning ordinance by amending Article 2, Land Use Regulations, Part 2, permitted use by base zoning district, and Part 3, tables of permitted uses to clarify 5993, tobacco stores and stands includes all types of smoke shops, provide clarifying definition of a smoke shop, and make it a conditional use where it's presently a permitted use, and provide appropriate distance required from schools, public, private parks, churches, residential areas, or other similar establishments. Ms. Morgan?
Okay, so this is in response to some concern of city council members about the proliferation of these tobacco stores and smoke shops, particularly in the downtown area, although they have been throughout the city. And what it would do, and you all have the ordinance in front of you, but it would require there to be a distance. Number one, it better defines tobacco and smoke shops because our zoning ordinance is very old. All these things are being updated with the overall zoning ordinance, rewrite, but this is trying to address it too. But it would require that tobacco and smoke shops that are located within 500 feet of any school, public park, public or private park, church or residential area within 500 feet of other such establishment are prohibited. So, and they talked about how these would be measured, and then
good evening.
would also have to meet the CT district conditions as well. So, this would, help limit them and have them in areas that wouldn't be as impactful in residential areas or schools, with the idea that, children being subjected to the type of facility that this is not necessarily a good idea, that kind of thing.
That's exactly the same thing with adult stores.
I don't think anyone wants to be heard on this, but I did have a question because I think it had, Ms. Jacobs, had an email on this about the existing.
Well, I had a question, 2 questions. One is, we have this situation on Daniel Street right now, and it would be, I think, if you measured it, within 500 feet of the first residential property in our neighborhood. Would this be they be grandfathered in with this?
So as the ordinance is written now, it would just be grandfathered. And we have heard from council that they may want to push for amortization. But that is not how the ordinance is written at present. It's
So they'd be
written just
okay.
for grandfather.
What's the other one?
Well, the other problem, I think, and I spoke with Mr. Morgan about this, is if we just would enforce their signage, because when they went up out there, they were like neon lights and flashing words and flying things. If we would just enforce our signage about it, I don't think it would be quite the problem. And I know that's been some concern for the residents that sit right there and go in that entrance, dodging that. So maybe we have other ways to enforce some of the intrusions, if you will, so.
And do they have restriction on operation, their hours of operation?
They only are restricted by the zoning district they're in, and most of them are in either limited business or general business.
Probably.
So they're allowed to operate till 11 p.m. You know.
Yep, it's one popped up right there on Moultrie.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments, or is a motion?
Oh, whatever.
Ms. Lancaster?
Oh, sure.
Let's see on huge part.
Okay,
You're first.
Motion to approve this. I second the motion.
So there's a motion by Mr. Clark, our newest member,
James.
to approve the ordinance amendment number 2, is seconded by Mr. Lassane. Is that correct? I got that right?
Yes.
Any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition? So that's 7 in favor, none opposed. Can we take any of the zonings together? We have 3 through.
All of them.
Yes. 3,
Okay,
4, 5.
I'll read them as
6,
they're read.
7, and 8.
3 is 1808 Huntington Drive. And then 4 is 917 Trent Street. Number 5 is 750 Wexford Road. Number 6 is 22413 Plant Street. Number 7 is 1763 Three Oaks Avenue. And number 8 is 1856 St. Julian Drive. And we got 8. We want 10 next month, but that's okay. We'll take 8. So those are read in the record, Mr. Morgan.
And I'll just zip through these. Single family residences, they in general, they became them from Charleston County R4, come into the city as SR1.
All lakes over.
Yes, yes. And so we're just going through the imagery now, of all these, and again. R4 coming into the city. They are all existing residences surrounded by other annexed properties. You can see from these images here. And we're just kind of scrolling through them. There we go. And here's the last one, which is a little bit more out in the middle, but again, an existing residence, R4 to SR1 in the city. And there we go. And the last one, St. Julian. So here.
Okay. Ms. Bryant, I heard you nod. I saw you nod. Does that mean you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay.
Item, do I need to specify the items?
Yeah, just say 3 through
3 through 8.
3 through 8 on the zoning. So
Under
second-
zoning.
Second by
Hey,
Ms.
you
Joyce.
can give it to sleep.
Second by Ms. Joyce.
I will second.
You did second.
Yep.
Okay.
You need to say.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of approving items 3 through 8, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition? That's 7 in favor, not opposed. Mr. Morgan, any other updates we need?
I know Miss Jacobs had super fast, couple of quick questions, updates.
Only a
If you can
couple.
remind me which things you wanted updated on. You were asking about zoning ordinance.
Well, we probably don't want to sit here for as many
I was
updates.
just gonna
as
give
we
some
need.
dates. I was just gonna
But
give some dates.
I know that Union Pier is still going on.
Yes.
With the addition of a council. We did have the peninsula plan here with the consults from the consultants from Union Pier. And they're also looking at the new district that there's going to come for us. They're calling it Waterfront Redevelopment District.
Correct.
Yeah, and actually, I was, y'all heard how much I had concerns about that, but they're being more expansive in their scope now, of looking at all the areas. It's very helpful. It was a very good couple days of community engagement. My only concern now is calling it redevelopment. It makes people nervous, maybe looking at the name, you know, want to keep people sideways with the naming of what it's called.
I think the only reason we had that title is pretty much all the areas we were considering for that title are already developed in one way or another, be it a landfill, be it a chemical plant in the past.
just-
that kind of thing.
Makes people worry that we're gonna go in there and do something that we're not. I don't know. I was trying to see how things went with naming. But just so y'all know, the Peninsula Plan had two big engagements where Union Peer Consultants were here, the water plan people were there. A lot of people came out and talked about how those things are gonna influence or integrate with the Peninsula Plan that we're gonna see.
Thank you.
So.
Yes, ma'am. Anything else? We good? Mr. Morgan, we good?
So just real quick, so to give you some dates, so the zoning ordinance folks should be back probably late February to talk about the analysis of our current zoning ordinance and get public comment. And once they have gotten all that comment, they will then spend the bulk of the year writing the new zoning ordinance that then will be brought back to everybody sometime in the fall, late fall of 24. So we're about to have the last main engagement period before that group goes away and start drafting the ordinance. And we will also meet with all our subcommittees at that time when they're here in town. The Peninsula Plan folks will be back in early February. And that will be another visit here with some ideas on the Peninsula Plan. And we hope to have the waterfront district, may it be redevelopment district, drafted by the end of March and have some meetings and discussion about that in April, probably coming to you all in April. And then the Union Pier folks are going to be working on things and probably have some sort of proposal to you all after April, May, June, something like that. And then what else have I missed?
The zoning code rewrite team has presented staff with like a.
Yes, we have been presented with the analysis of the current code. We're giving them comments. Those are going to go back to them in the first week of January. They'll make some adjustments and then they will release it in advance of their visit here so that the public can review them. And then they'll be here a few weeks later for public comment.
So we won't see that analysis until they have time to re-comment on that analysis.
Correct. Staff is going to send comments and then once the public version is there, then you all will see that, as will the committees. Actually, the committees are going to go a little bit earlier because they are giving comments as well. So they'll get it in January.
Okay. Thank you all. And I hope everybody has a very good holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, peaceful and safe as well.
Can I ask one
Good.
question? Can we all- I want to be off.
Yes, ma'am.
So
You too.
I want to ask something that is going to sound really funny coming out of my, Christopher, I'd like to ask a question.
All right, wait for a second till we know what all you do.
Are we off the record?
You can say whatever you want now.
Okay. No.
Now you're good.
So I have a video of me saying